In 1962, 17 coal miners prepared for a workday that would unravel the fabric of their small Appalachian community forever. The day began like any other in the mining town of Matewan, West Virginia, where the Blackwater Mine stood as both lifeblood and looming danger for the families who depended on it. Men filled the air with hearty greetings and their usual banter, their faces weathered by years of hard labor and coal dust. They kissed their wives goodbye on porches cluttered with flower pots and rocking chairs. Children waved wildly, promising to keep the house tidy and meals warm. The clatter of metal lunch pails and the steady thrum of the elevator descending into the Earth's dark belly created a rhythm of life intertwined with danger. Among those men was James Patrick Morrison, 31 years old, the lead foreman, and grandfather to the very man who would uncover the truth 50 years later. That morning, James checked his gear, exchanged nods with his crew, and vanished beneath the surface. The sun rose higher, shadows shortened, and the mine swallowed 17 lives in silence. When the whistle blew at shift's end, the cage returned empty, no echoes of familiar voices returning to the light. From the surface, panic sparked. Rescue teams descended into the labyrinthine mine tunnels only to be met with collapsed passageways and an ominous silence. The official report cited a catastrophic methane explosion, a deadly force of nature that sealed 3 tunnels instantly, trapping the miners below. The company dispersed settlements to the grieving families, calculated payouts that could never equate to the priceless lives lost. The Blackwater Mine was permanently shuttered, its entrance blocked with concrete and steel, burying the tragedy beneath dusty history. Over the decades, the town moved on. Shops changed hands, children grew distant, and the memories faded into hushed whispers. James Morrison's death was spoken of in reverent tones but cloaked in silence, especially within his own family. His son told his grandson Danny only that his grandfather had suffered a fatal heart attack, a convenient tale to shield the boy from harsh truths. But some secrets refused to stay buried in the dark. 50 years later, Sheriff Danny Morrison found himself reluctantly tasked with sorting through neglected county archives. Paper records from half a century ago, yellowed by time and neglect, filled boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. The scent of dust and old ink mingled with the quiet hum of the basement. The file labeled simply Blackwater Mine Incident, 1962, caught Danny's eye because of the name listed within, the same name his father had always avoided discussing. James Patrick Morrison, the lead foreman, was recorded among the 17 men who had disappeared that fateful April morning. This discovery shattered Danny's understanding of his family's past. He sifted through faded reports, witness statements typed on fragile paper, and photographs of the mine entrance, now corroded but still formidable. The official account was chillingly concise. At 11:47 a.m. on April 23rd, a methane gas explosion rocked the eastern tunnels, trapping 17 men beneath layers of rubble. Rescue teams were forced to abandon their efforts as the unstable tunnels threatened further collapse. 17 lives extinguished in moments, 17 families left in ruin. Yet as Danny examined the documents, discrepancies emerged. A hastened timeline, inexplicable notes from deputies recommending further inquiry, and a sudden order from Sheriff Hawkins to close the investigation without resolution. Questions multiplied. Why was the investigation curtailed so abruptly? Why had the mine been sealed within days? Why had the families been silenced with quick settlements? And why had his own family been kept in the dark for decades? Haunted by these doubts, Danny reached out to his father, seeking answers only to be met with evasions and warnings. "Some stones are better left unturned," his father cautioned before ending the call. The phrase echoed through Danny's mind like a grim prophecy as he ventured out toward the long-abandoned Blackwater site. Nature was reclaiming the land. The gravel road choked with weeds, rusted rail tracks twisted and broken, and the mine entrance barricaded with concrete slabs reinforced by steel beams. The sealed tunnels whispered of secrets, locked away beneath layers of stone and time. But there was something unusual about the ceiling, new concrete dates stamped just days after the reported explosion, suggesting the mine was hurriedly closed. Danny's instincts, honed from years of law enforcement, sensed a cover-up larger than a mere accident, and his suspicions deepened when he spotted a figure lurking in the shadows of the tree line. A watcher, silent and unseen yet unmistakably present. As Danny left the site, a shadowy phone call from an unknown source warned him to stop digging. The past had claws, and it was ready to defend its secrets fiercely. Little did he know, his grandfather's fate was entwined with dangerous knowledge, knowledge that had been worth killing for, and that even 50 years later was still protected by powerful forces willing to go to deadly lengths to keep the truth sealed in darkness. Danny spent the night poring over the yellow documents scattered across his desk. The official report was detailed, yet left too many uncomfortable gaps. Witness statements conflicted, timelines contradicted, and several notes from cautious deputies suggested the investigation was far from complete. One handwritten note, clipped discreetly to the back of the incident report, caught his eye. Investigation incomplete. Recommend further inquiry into company safety protocols and timeline of events. Several discrepancies noted in witness statements. Below it, in a different hand, was the damning instruction, "Case closed by order of Sheriff Hawkins. No further investigation required." Danny's heart pounded. Why would the sheriff halt an investigation into 17 deaths without full clarity? The folder also contained settlement agreements between the Cumberland Coal Company and the families. Each paid a mere $5,000, significant money in 1962, but a mere token for lives lost. What seemed stranger still was how quickly the company forced the settlements. The explosion occurred on April 23rd, and by May 15th, everything was wrapped up and the mine sealed. Industrial accidents with fatalities often dragged on for years with lawsuits and drawn-out legal battles. This was too swift, too polished. His fingers trembled as he flipped through geological survey reports tucked within the evidence envelope. These technical documents contain one startling phrase repeatedly emphasized: high-grade uranium ore deposits. Estimated value $2.3 million per ton. Uranium wasn't just any mineral, it was a Cold War prize, critical for nuclear weapons development. Suddenly, the tragedy morphed into something darker. It wasn't just a mining accident, it was a story more sinister. A cover-up hiding the theft of strategic resources. The radio on his desk crackled to life, jolting him from his thoughts. "Sheriff Morrison, dispatch here. We've got a request from the state mining inspectors for some historical safety records relating to your investigation." Danny hesitated, gathering the files into a neat stack. The puzzle in his mind was growing clearer. His grandfather's death, the mine explosion, the sealed tunnels, the uranium surveys, it all pointed to a secret that powerful forces had buried for 50 years. As the evening shadows lengthened beyond his office window, Danny made a decision that would alter his life forever. He was going back to the Blackwater Mine of Archfimis, not as a curious sheriff, but as a seeker of truth, to uncover the dark depths where lies had been entombed alongside 17 lost souls. Danny drove the winding mountain road toward the old Blackwater mine site, the air thick with pine and damp earth. The road was cracked and overgrown, weeds pushing through the asphalt like nature reclaiming what was once hers. As he approached, the entrance loomed, a gaping mouth sealed by concrete blocks and steel beams welded into a crosshatch pattern. The dates stamped in the concrete, April 24th and 25th, 1962, stood out. These were the days immediately following the reported explosion. Odd, since rescue efforts were said to have continued for weeks. How could they seal the mine so quickly if they were still searching? Danny snapped at photos, his eyes tracing every line of the heavy reinforcement. The air was eerie, filled with a silence that spoke louder than any scream. Nearby, concrete foundations of long-gone buildings lay cracked and half-buried. Rusted rail tracks bent and twisted, leading into nothingness. The mine hadn't just closed, it had been barricaded with intent. As Danny surveyed the scene, a shadow moved along the tree line. A man, tall and gaunt, wore a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Danny raised his hand in greeting, voice steady but cautious. "Hey there, you need something?" The figure vanished into the woods without a word. A chill ran down Danny's spine. Someone was watching. His radio crackled, and dispatch's voice was sharp. "Sheriff Morrison, got a call about suspicious activity near the mine. Possible break-in." Danny's jaw tightened. "Send Deputy Williams out. I'm handling it." As he turned back to the sealed entrance, Danny understood this place was not simply a relic of tragedy. It was a secret fortress. Somewhere beneath this concrete, the truth lay buried, waiting for someone brave enough to expose it. Merton's polished smile didn't reach his eyes as he spoke. Look, Sheriff Morrison, you seem to think there's some conspiracy or hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. This property and what remains of the mine belongs to me now. No one's getting past those concrete seals, and no one will find anything different from the official story. Those miners died in a methane explosion. Simple as that. Danny studied the man carefully, noting the subtle signs of tension beneath the practiced calm. Mr. Merton, the evidence I've uncovered suggests that the mine was sealed against protocols, and there are inconsistencies in the investigation timeline. The families of those 17 men deserve to know the full truth about what happened here. I intend to find that truth, no matter what obstacles I face. Merton's jaw clenched, his voice lowering with an edge of warning. You're treading on dangerous ground, Sheriff. Some stones are better left unturned. The mine's closure and settlement agreements were legal, final. Pushing this further won't bring those men back, and it may well bring trouble to your own doorstep. Danny's gaze hardened. It's not just about the past. I owe it to my grandfather and those families. And I'm prepared to face whatever trouble comes with seeking the truth. Merton's eyes flashed momentarily with something almost like fear before he masked it with a cold smile. If you insist on digging up old wounds, be careful. Some secrets around here aren't buried by accident. The conversation ended as Merton turned abruptly and disappeared into the shadowed halls of his estate, leaving Danny with a growing conviction that the layers of silence surrounding the Blackwater Mine hid something far more sinister than an industrial accident. Despite the heavy walls and barred gates, Danny knew the truth couldn't stay locked forever. He called in favors, contacting former miners, town elders, and anyone who might remember whispered stories from that time. An elderly woman named Clara Henderson was among the first to open up, a descendant of one of the lost miners. Too many of us were told to keep quiet, she said, eyes clouded with decades of pain. My grandfather always said there were things happening in that mine that scared even the strongest men. Men who spoke up disappeared, or worse. Her words hung in the air like a warning. Danny's investigation began to take shape, revealing a web of corporate greed, government secrecy, and desperate men caught in the crossfire. Reports surfaced of uranium deposits hidden beneath the coal seams, a mineral coveted during the Cold War for its nuclear potential. The methane explosion might have been a convenient cover story to protect more valuable secrets. Letters from whistleblowers, faded photographs of secret meetings, cryptic records pointing to hurried closures, all pieced together a story of betrayal that stretched beyond the mine shafts. Danny's nights grew restless. Shadows danced in every corner, voices whispered threats over crackling radios, and strangers appeared in the tree lines. One night after leaving the tavern, he sensed he was being followed. His hand never strayed far from the holster as he doubled back, but the figure had vanished like smoke. The deeper Danny dug, the more dangerous his pursuit became. Calls warning him to stop were ignored. He knew he was playing a perilous game, but some family histories demanded justice, even if it meant waking the ghosts that others preferred to keep buried. The turning point came when Danny discovered a faded map hidden inside an old mine survey. It marked a small chamber deep underground, unaccounted for in official reports, a sealed room untouched by any explosion. Local lore spoke of secret vaults stocked with rare ores, but this was more than that. The sealed chamber was a tomb not only of bodies, but of truths someone had gone to great lengths to conceal. Gaining permission to break the seal was impossible through legal channels, so Danny assembled a trusted team of investigators and former miners willing to risk their safety. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they descended through a narrow shaft, the air heavy with dust in anticipation. The chamber door, reinforced with steel and concrete, bore fresh scratches, evidence that someone had been recently inside. Breaking the lock required time and care, but when the heavy door finally groaned open, the team was met with a chilling sight. The walls were lined with crates stamped with government seals, and scattered around were personal belongings, tools still rusted, helmets, and faded photographs. Most haunting were the skeletal remains arranged carefully in rows, showing signs of violence inconsistent with a gas explosion. Bullet casings, fractured bones, even makeshift barricades spoke of a desperate defense. The miners hadn't died in an accident. They had been executed, silenced to protect secrets that could shake the foundations of power. Evidence was collected, documentation started, but before news could spread, Danny's phone buzzed with a cryptic message. Stop, or be next. The fight for truth had only just begun, and with it, the shadows of a conspiracy decades in the making stepped into the light. Danny sat across from Harold Gibbons in the dimly lit booth of a quiet diner outside town. The old man's hands trembled as he unfolded a worn manila folder, careful not to spill the contents onto the stained table. Inside were yellowed photographs, handwritten notes, and mimeographed memos that looked like they had been hidden for decades. I was there the day it happened, Harold began, voice rough with age and suppressed emotion. Thought it was just another explosion at first. They told us the methane gas built up. But I knew something didn't add up. Danny leaned forward, urging him on. Harold's eyes darted around nervously, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. The mine wasn't just closed because of an accident. They sealed those tunnels fast. Too fast. There were men in suits, not miners, overseeing the sealing. They hauled away boxes of files and equipment, tried to hide everything. He swallowed hard. And anyone who asked questions disappeared. Folks who talked too much or poked their noses where they didn't belong. That afternoon, I saw my buddy Carl Hutchkins call in sick. Said he couldn't stomach going down that day. I think he knew what was really about to happen. Danny's pulse quickened. Carl Hutchkins had been a miner himself, someone who had vanished quietly years later with whispers of tragedy surrounding him. They weren't just after the coal, Harold said, voice dropping to a whisper. That mine sat on a gold mine of uranium, rare earth elements rich enough to buy the entire county a lifetime. The government was involved, hiding the truth under layers of coal dust and bureaucracy. Photos showed clandestine meetings between corporate men and shadowy officials. Notes hinted at dangerous protocols and silenced warnings. Danny felt the weight of years pressing down as Harold's tale unfolded, a tapestry woven with fear, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder. Outside, the wind howled faintly against the diner's windows, a mournful echo of the ghost long buried beneath the mountain. Harold's final words lingered. 50 years they tried to bury this secret, Sheriff, but the dead don't rest easy when injustice lives on. Danny's resolve hardened. He knew the path ahead would be perilous, but justice, no matter how long delayed, demanded they walk it with courage. Danny walked out of the diner into the cold dusk air, his mind racing. Harold's confession had shattered the thin veil of normalcy the town had tried so hard to maintain. The conspiracy that had claimed 17 lives was bigger than he had imagined, reaching into the highest corridors of power. As he drove back toward the sheriff's office, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Stop digging before you wake the ghosts. He ignored it, but the warning pressed heavily on his chest. Back at the office, Danny combed through maps, photos, and encrypted documents, piecing together the story of a sealed room deep within the mine, untouched by the explosion, but bearing the weight of decades of hidden truths. Determined to act, he called in favors from retired miners, engineers, and trusted deputies. Together they planned a bold mission to pry open the concrete barricade and uncover what had been so fiercely protected. The night before the operation, Danny sat alone at his dining table. The letter from his grandfather, discovered among the buried files, spread before him. His grandfather had left behind warnings and evidence, urging that the truth be revealed no matter the cost. Chalk dust in his boots, tools strapped to his belt, Danny led the small team to the mine entrance under the cover of darkness. The air was thick with anticipation and a lingering silence that felt unnatural. As the crowbar scraped against reinforced steel and the concrete gave way in slow, resisting chunks, voices from the past whispered on the wind. Inside, the narrow tunnel swallowed their light, revealing the chilling evidence: rusted mining helmets, personal effects frozen in time, and skeletal remains, arranged not by accident but by violence. Bullet holes lined the walls, makeshift barricades told of desperate resistance. The truth was raw, brutal, and undeniable. Outside, dawn crept over the mountains, painting the sky with shades of fire. Word of the discovery spread fast, and with it, the shadows watching from the periphery moved closer. Danny knew that unearthing the past came with a price. The ghosts of Blackwater were restless, and they were ready to fight. The news of the mine's reopening to investigators sent ripples through Matewan and beyond. Reporters from distant cities arrived, their cameras capturing images of miners' gear and human remains carefully collected in body bags. Families of the lost miners, some long scattered across the country, were notified, their grief reopening wounds that never fully healed. Among the crowd was Carl Hutchkins, thought long gone but returned from the shadows with a resolve forged by decades of silence. He spoke publicly for the first time about what he had witnessed, the coordinated execution disguised as an accident, the gunshots muffled by collapsing tunnels, the men in suits who came to oversee the cover-up. His testimony gave voice to decades of rumors and suspicions, peeling back the layers of deception carefully built to protect power and profit. Legislators in Washington called for hearings, demanding explanations and justice for those whose lives had been stolen beneath the mountain. Faced with public scrutiny, agencies and corporations scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal, while internal investigations opened old wounds and ignited fierce resistance. Danny found himself at the center of a maelstrom, threatened by those desperate to bury the truth once more. His family was watched, his every move shadowed by unknown eyes. Yet he refused to back down. The fight was no longer just about his grandfather or the 17 miners, but about exposing a system where greed corrupted justice and the powerful silenced the powerless. As the sun set behind the Appalachian Ridge, Danny stood at the mine's reopened entrance. The air was heavy with the ghosts of the past, but also with the hope of justice finally breaking through decades of darkness. He whispered a promise to the silent earth. Your names will not be forgotten. Not now, not ever. In the weeks that followed, the investigation uncovered a vast network of collusion that stretched far beyond the isolated mine. Documents revealed secret contracts between mining companies and government agencies, agreements to extract uranium and other rare minerals under the guise of industrial operations. The explosion at Blackwater Mine was just one piece of a larger, covert program aimed at securing strategic resources during the Cold War, no matter the human cost. Prosecutors filed charges against corporate executives, local officials, and law enforcement officers implicated in the cover-up and murders. Trials became battles of wills, pitting truth against power in courtrooms filled with tension and guarded secrets. Meanwhile, the families of the victims formed a coalition, demanding compensation and accountability. Their courage sparked nationwide awareness of government corruption and industrial neglect, igniting calls for reform and transparency. Through it all, Danny became a symbol of perseverance and justice, his determination unyielding, despite threats and intimidation. Late into the nights, as he reviewed evidence and prepared testimonies, he thought often of his grandfather, a man who had paid with his life to protect a truth that finally, after 50 years, was beginning to see the light. The mountain air carried the echo of a long-buried promise. No secret could withstand the will of those who refused to forget. And in the heart of Appalachia, healing had just begun. The fight for justice was far from over. Powerful forces rose in opposition, deploying layers of influence to obstruct the truth from surfacing. Corporate giants spun elaborate legal defenses, mounting relentless counterattacks to discredit witnesses and bury damning evidence beneath a flood of bureaucracy and secrecy. Federal agencies invoked national security clauses to classify key documents, claiming the protection of Cold War secrets, and thwarted every request for transparency. Courtrooms became arenas of tension and subterfuge, where prosecutors faced unseen obstacles and witnesses feared retaliation. Danny found himself entangled in battles as much political as legal, forced to balance his role as a seeker of truth with his duties as a protector of his family in the face of increasing threats. Night after night, anonymous calls chilled his spine. Shadowy figures watched from a distance, and unmarked vehicles lurked near his home. A constant reminder that exposing the past carried grave risks. Yet in these moments of darkness, the steadfast support of the miners' families, their descendants, and a growing coalition of activists kindled a beacon of hope. They organized memorials and vigils, their voices rising in unison, refusing to let 17 men be forgotten as mere statistics. News crews broadcast their stories nationwide, exposing the layers of deception that had cloaked Blackwater Mine for half a century. Legislators introduced sweeping reforms aimed at enhancing mining safety, increasing corporate accountability, and mandating transparency in government dealings. Public sentiment shifted, demanding that tragedies like Blackwater never be hidden behind closed doors again. Danny often returned to the mine's entrance, now a solemn memorial site, its heavy gates open to those who came to remember and bear witness. The mountain air was filled with a mix of reverence and resolve. The silence beneath the earth was no longer one of forgotten sorrow, but of enduring remembrance. 50 years after that fateful morning, the truth had finally emerged from the shadows. It was a testament to the power of persistence, courage, and the unyielding human spirit that no matter how deep a secret was buried, justice, like light, finds a way to break through the darkness. The Blackwater Mine no longer stood as a tomb of silence, but as a beacon of hope, an enduring tribute to those who had died, those who had lived with the pain, and those who refused to let history forget. The months following the public revelation of the Blackwater Mine conspiracies marked a new era for Matewan and the families scarred by decades of deceit. Prosecutors meticulously assembled their cases, targeting a sprawling network of corporate executives, government officials, and law enforcement officers implicated in the years of cover-ups and murders. Courtrooms were filled with testimonies from surviving witnesses, experts, and tireless investigators, exposing a chilling saga of greed and betrayal that spanned decades. Many defendants attempted to shield themselves behind layers of legal maneuvering and claims of national security. But the tide of public opinion and compelling evidence made evasion increasingly difficult. At the forefront of the battle stood Danny Morrison, whose determination to honor his grandfather's legacy fueled his every step. The families of the 17 miners, once silenced by fear and settlement checks, found their voices, speaking out in unison, demanding justice and closure. Memorial services brought communities together. Names once forgotten were etched onto plaques and monuments, their courage finally acknowledged. Across the state and nation, the Blackwater saga sparked legislative change. New laws mandated greater transparency in mining operations, stringent safety protocols, and enhanced protections for whistleblowers. The federal government established oversight committees to monitor mineral extraction and related contracts, ensuring no such unchecked secrecy could claim innocent lives again. Yet despite the progress, the scars ran deep. Many families grappled with grief that no amount of compensation could heal. Danny often reflected on the personal sacrifices made, the threats endured, and the painful truths uncovered. Standing at the mine's entrance one crisp autumn evening, he gazed into the fading light filtering through the trees. Here lay the final resting place of 17 men, miners, fathers, husbands, whose deaths had been buried beneath lies. But now, thanks to relentless pursuit and collective courage, their stories had brought forth a legacy of vigilance and hope. The earth beneath Blackwater Mine no longer held secrets. It held remembrance. Danny whispered a quiet vow to the wind, a pledge that the sacrifices of those men would never be forgotten, and that justice would always demand a voice, even if silenced for 50 long years. In the wake of the trials and the sweeping reforms, Matewan began the slow process of healing. The streets that once echoed with whispered fears now resonated with healing prayers and renewed community spirit. Families returned to gather at the newly erected Blackwater Memorial Park, where names carved in stone told stories that had finally found their way into the light. Survivors and descendants shared memories, tears mingling with laughter as they reclaimed their history from the shadows of silence. Danny Morrison, once an outsider in his own family's buried past, became a pillar of hope and justice, a living testament to the power of truth long deferred. His tireless work extended beyond courtrooms and archives. He helped establish support groups for families of missing workers, advocating for improved workers' rights and corporate transparency nationwide. The story of Blackwater Mine also ignited a new wave of investigation into other cold cases involving industrial accidents masked by deceitful cover-ups, showing how the courage of one small town could spark a nationwide reckoning. But amid progress came warning signs. In quiet conversations, Danny heard tales of others who had vanished, secrets still guarded by forces resistant to change. He knew the battle was far from over. The forces of greed and corruption often found new disguises. Yet, with every name remembered, every injustice acknowledged, the hope for a safer, more honest future grew stronger. On clear nights, when the mountain winds whispered through the trees, Danny would stand near the mine's entrance, feeling the weight of history and the promise of change. The earth beneath was no longer just a grave. It was a foundation for truth, resilience, and the enduring legacy of those who refused to be forgotten. The Blackwater Mine had finally told its story, a story that would echo through generations, a solemn reminder that justice, no matter how long denied, eventually finds its voice. Years after the Blackwater Mine scandal rocked Matewan, Danny Morrison found himself reflecting on the journey that began with a dusty file in a forgotten archive. The fight for truth had transformed not only the town, but himself. What once was a small sheriff's quest turned into a nationwide movement exposing the dark underbelly of corporate and government collusion. Families that had long been silenced now spoke openly, their voices a chorus demanding justice and reform. New generations grew up knowing the full story of Blackwater, a cautionary tale about the cost of silence and the power of perseverance. Memorials stood as hallowed ground, and educational programs were established to honor the miners' sacrifices while teaching lessons about corporate responsibility and workers' rights. Danny often returned to the mine's entrance, now a protected historical site that welcomed visitors seeking to understand the complex history buried beneath its surface. In quiet moments, he imagined the 17 miners, their faces bright with hope on that April morning in 1962, their lives unjustly cut short. He thought of his grandfather, a man who had stood steadfast for truth despite the dangers. The shadows of corruption had been pushed back, but Danny knew vigilance was eternal. Powerful interests still lurked in the background, waiting for complacency to take root. Yet the story of Blackwater was a testament to the fact that courage could shine a light through the darkest tunnels. And for Danny Morrison, for Matewan, and for every family shattered but unbroken, it was more than a story. It was a legacy of justice earned, truth uncovered, and a future guarded with unyielding resolve. The years following the exposure of the Blackwater Mine conspiracy brought profound change to Matewan, a town forever scarred but also galvanized by the relentless pursuit of justice. Danny Morrison found himself navigating a world vastly different from the shadows and silences of those early days as an investigator. The once quiet community was now a focal point of national attention, drawing journalists, historians, and activists determined to ensure the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. The Blackwater Memorial Park stood as a solemn reminder of the 17 men who had lost their lives, their names etched in granite with care and reverence. Families who had once been strangers found one another, their connections revived by shared grief, resilience, and an unquenchable desire for healing. Danny helped establish forums where survivors and descendants could gather, sharing stories, seeking counseling, and advocating for reforms in mining safety and corporate accountability. Legislative action followed, fueled by public outcry and the undeniable evidence unearthed during investigations. New laws mandated stricter safety protocols, transparency in corporate operations, and protections for whistleblowers who dared to speak out. Yet, for every victory, Danny remained vigilant, aware that the forces of greed and secrecy never disappeared, but merely concealed themselves in new forms. Following court verdicts and sentencing, numerous executives and officials faced justice, but echoes of the conspiracy lingered in boardrooms and government offices, reminding all that power corrupted subtly and pervasively. In the evenings, Danny often returned to the mine's entrance, where wildflowers bloomed among the rusted rails and cracked concrete. The air, once heavy with dust and despair, carried now a fragile sense of peace mixed with determination. He pictured the miners, young fathers, steadfast men, who had worked these tunnels, never knowing their fate was sealed by more than nature's hazards. Memories of his grandfather's courage and unyielding sense of duty surged anew in his heart. Across Appalachia, other cold cases were revisited, inspired by Blackwater's revelations, shining light into forgotten tragedies. Educational programs and documentaries ensured that Blackwater's lessons reached new generations, a bulwark against apathy and forgetting. Through it all, Danny remained a sentinel of truth, his story intertwined with that of a town that refused to be broken. He understood that real healing was not just about uncovering the past, but about building a future where justice was constant and voices once silenced were forever heard. And so, under the vast Appalachian sky, as stars emerged above the mountains, Danny silently vowed that no secret, no matter how deeply buried, could ever extinguish the flame of justice or the memory of those who gave their lives for it. Matewan's darkest chapter had been written, but its story was far from over. It was now a testament to the enduring human spirit and the relentless pursuit of truth. The story of Blackwater Mine became a beacon far beyond the bounds of Matewan, echoing through the hills and valleys of Appalachia and reaching ears across the nation. What started as a tragic industrial accident revealed itself to be a sprawling conspiracy interwoven with greed, government secrecy, and the relentless pursuit of wealth at the expense of innocent lives. Danny Morrison, once a young sheriff plagued by questions about his grandfather's death, transformed into a symbol of unwavering resolve, a man who refused to let history be rewritten by those with power. He traveled to state capitals and federal hearings, offering testimony steeped in personal loss and hard-won evidence. Lawmakers listened intently, compelled by the gravity of the revelations and the mounting public pressure. From this momentum sprang sweeping policy changes aimed at reforming not just mining regulations, but corporate governance and government oversight. New legislation required transparency in mineral extraction projects, mandatory safety inspections, and harsher penalties for companies that concealed workplace hazards. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, ensuring that those who spoke out against wrongdoing did not share the grim fates of past informants. Meanwhile, a network of grassroots organizations blossomed, composed of survivors, families, and activists dedicated to exposing similar injustices nationwide. The Blackwater case inspired new cold case investigations, uncovering patterns of negligence and cover-ups that had long gone unchallenged. Danny played a pivotal role in mentoring these efforts, sharing his experiences and strategies with others fighting for their loved ones. Throughout these battles, the community of Matewan evolved, shedding the veil of despair for one of cautious hope. The Blackwater Memorial Park became a pilgrimage site where families gathered to honor those lost, and future generations learned the price of silence and the power of truth. Schools incorporated Blackwater's history into their curricula, ensuring the story would not fade with time. Local art and music commemorated the miners' courage, turning tragedy into cultural heritage. Yet despite the victories, Danny understood that vigilance was eternal. Corruption adapted, secrecy hid behind new facades, and danger whispered in unfamiliar corners. He remained watchful, aware that the legacy of Blackwater was not just a chapter in history, but a living testament, a challenge and a charge to protect those who labor in the shadows and to shine light into every darkened corner where injustice hides. As he stood once again at the mine entrance, the weight of half a century's grief in his bones, he felt the unity of a community transformed. The earth beneath had finally surrendered its secrets, and through their resilience, the voices of the 17 miners soared eternal, carried on the wind, a solemn reminder that courage, hope, and truth endure beyond any darkness. Danny whispered a vow to the fading light. Their sacrifices would live not just in memory, but in every act of justice yet to come. The unveiling of the Blackwater Mine conspiracy sent shockwaves that rippled far beyond the rugged hills of West Virginia, shaking the very foundations of corporate and governmental institutions long thought untouchable. What began as a quest for truth by one determined sheriff had blossomed into a nationwide reckoning, a brutal expose revealing decades of greed, deception, and systemic betrayal. Danny Morrison found himself thrust into the harsh glare of the public eye, a reluctant hero carrying the weight of 17 broken families and countless silenced voices. His days blurred into relentless cycles of investigations, court battles, and advocacy, fueled by memories of his grandfather and the miners whose lives had been stolen beneath layers of coal and lies. The courtroom dramas that followed were intense and fraught with danger. Prosecutors wielded piles of evidence painstakingly compiled from forgotten archives, clandestine testimonies, and covert surveillance, confronting well-financed and ruthless defense teams intent on preserving their clients' status and fortunes. Weeks of testimony unveiled chilling accounts of corporate collusion, graft, and dark governmental machinations. Illegal uranium extraction, hidden beneath the innocuous veil of a coal mining operation, cold-blooded executions disguised as industrial accidents, and protective silencing orchestrated by local officials and federal agents alike. Despite intense pressure and veiled threats, witnesses came forward, emboldened by the growing support of the community and nationwide outrage. Local newspapers and national media chronicled the unfolding saga, shining relentless light on corruption and demanding accountability. The families of the lost miners, once resigned to silent mourning, found renewed purpose. They banded together in support groups and advocacy organizations, providing each other strength while pressing government bodies for reparations and further investigation. Memorials and monuments rose from the mountainside, becoming sacred spaces where remembrance intertwined with a fierce call for justice. Legislative halls echoed with the voices of survivors, experts, and activists pushing for comprehensive reforms. Laws were introduced and passed, mandating transparency in mining operations, tighter safety protocols, and stronger protections for whistleblowers, aiming to prevent another tragedy buried by deceit. Government oversight of mineral extraction was overhauled, with new agencies empowered to investigate and regulate with unprecedented authority. Yet, amid these victories, shadows lurked. Powerful interests resisted, harnessing political influence to slow reforms and retain control. Secret meetings and backroom deals sought to dilute accountability. Danny himself became a target. His family was stalked by unknown figures, his home surveilled, and ominous warnings whispered through the grapevine. But his resolve remained unbroken, his commitment unyielding. He understood that the legacy of Blackwater Mine was a living challenge, a perpetual vigil against those who would trade human lives for profit, and a solemn promise to honor those who paid the ultimate price. In quiet moments, as he stood at the mouth of the once forbidden mine, the wind carrying faint echoes of pickaxes and brotherhood, Danny felt the presence of his grandfather and every miner lost. Their voices, once silenced, now rose in unison, an eternal chorus of courage, resilience, and hope. The earth beneath Blackwater no longer bore secrets, but bore a testament to the power of truth and the enduring strength of community. For Danny Morrison, for Matewan, and for every soul touched by the tragedy, the fight had transformed from mourning to movement. And in that transformation lay the promise that the darkness could never truly silence the light of justice. As years passed, the story of Blackwater Mine grew beyond the confines of Matewan, transforming from a local tragedy into a symbol of resilience, justice, and the relentless pursuit of truth in the face of systemic corruption. The small Appalachian town became a beacon, drawing attention from historians, journalists, scholars, and activists nationwide who sought to understand and share the profound lessons etched into its rugged landscape. Danny Morrison found himself at the center of this growing movement, his journey from a curious sheriff to a tireless advocate and guardian of his grandfather's legacy becoming an inspiration for those fighting for accountability across varied and distant industries. The courthouse steps frequently hosted rallies where survivors and descendants raised their voices, demanding stricter laws, compensation that recognized the full cost of loss, and protections to prevent such tragedies from repeating. The ripple effect was far-reaching. Mining regulations were rewritten, state and federal oversight agencies were strengthened with new powers, and corporate transparency became more than a lofty ideal. It became a mandated obligation. Schools incorporated Blackwater's history into their curricula, ensuring younger generations understood the price paid by so many to protect secrets and secure wealth. Museums and cultural centers opened exhibits dedicated to the miners and their families, weaving their stories into the broader tapestry of American industrial history. Art, literature, and music captured the spirit of sacrifice and the courage it took to expose long-buried truths. Yet, amidst the progress, Danny never lost sight of the human dimension, the faces behind the files, the sorrow beneath the statistics. He spent long hours meeting new families who had found closure through the investigation, listening to their stories, offering support, and connecting them to resources. He helped establish foundations dedicated to miner safety and public awareness, driven by a conviction that no one should endure what the Blackwater families had suffered. The shadows of those lost were honored not as forgotten ghosts, but as guiding lights for ongoing vigilance. However, the road remained fraught with challenges. Powerful factions sought to suppress further investigations, using legal delays, intimidation, and misinformation. Danny and his allies faced political resistance, threats to personal safety, and attempts to rewrite narratives for expedience. The bots, both personal and communal, were steep. Still, the community's spirit endured, anchored by the belief that transparency and justice were worth any sacrifice. Danny often found solace under the vast Appalachian sky, standing at the edge of the mine entrance where wildflowers now bloomed among the stones. Here, the silence was no longer oppressive but sacred, a testament to bitterness overcome by hope, shadows dispelled by light, and pain transformed into the courage to fight for tomorrow. He whispered into the wind a vow carried on the mountain breeze. The names of James Patrick Morrison and his fellow miners would live forever, their sacrifices a constant reminder that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will rise, persisting as a beacon for all who seek justice amidst the darkness. The story of Blackwater Mine was no longer just a chapter in history. It was a living legacy, etched into the heart of a community determined never to let silence or secrecy claim them again. The Blackwater Mine saga continued to unfold as the years stretched into decades, drawing in new generations and enkindling a broader movement that extended well beyond the Appalachian Hills. Danny Morrison's legacy became inseparable from the ongoing quest for justice, and his role evolved from a grieving sheriff to a national advocate for workers' rights and government accountability. Conferences, panel discussions, and legislative hearings featured his testimony and leadership, igniting passionate debates about the price of industrial secrecy and the responsibility of nations to their citizens. The plight of the 17 miners became emblematic of countless other forgotten tragedies, prompting investigations into other suspicious incidents masked as accidents across the country. Social media platforms and documentary filmmakers picked up the story, bringing it to global audiences hungry for truth in an era rife with misinformation. Local schools integrated Blackwater's history into their lessons, teaching students both the dangers of unchecked corporate power and the strength found in community resilience and activism. Meanwhile, coal mining companies, once aggressive in their denials, adopted new safety standards, transparency measures, and public engagement initiatives, driven by both reformers and market pressures. Danny worked tirelessly with nonprofits to establish scholarships for miners' children, healthcare funds for retired workers, and outreach programs that offered resources to families coping with trauma and loss. Yet, despite progress, the shadows loomed. Whispers of ongoing cover-ups, attempts to silence whistleblowers, and the resurgence of secret resource extractions kept the fight alive. Danny understood that true justice was a moving target, requiring constant vigilance. On quiet evenings, standing at the mine's entrance, now transformed into a memorial and educational site, he felt the weight of history in the pulse of a community forever marked but not broken. The earth beneath whispered stories of sacrifice, courage, and the unyielding human spirit that refuses to submit to silence. As the sun set over the Appalachian ridges, Danny's heart swelled with a mixture of sorrow and hope, a profound awareness that while dark chapters remain in history, the light of truth and justice can never be fully extinguished. The story of Blackwater Mine would endure, a solemn reminder that the fight for justice is timeless, driven by those who dare to seek the truth no matter the cost. Decades after the initial tragedy, the legacy of the Blackwater Mine continued to shape not only Matewan, but also the broader national consciousness regarding worker safety and corporate responsibility. Programs were established to commemorate the miners' sacrifice, including scholarships, museums, and annual remembrances that brought families together and strengthened community bonds. Danny Morrison dedicated his life to ensuring that the lessons of the past would guide the future, advocating relentlessly for transparency in industry and government accountability. His work inspired a network of activists, researchers, and journalists who uncovered similar patterns of neglect and corruption across the country, fueling waves of reform and activism. The mine itself was transformed from a site of horror into a historical landmark and educational center, open to visitors eager to learn the truth about the devastating consequences of greed and silence. Survivors and descendants found solace in shared stories and collective remembrance, but the wounds ran deep, and many struggled with the enduring pain of loss. The fight against powerful interests resistant to change was ongoing, underscoring the need for continued vigilance and courage. Danny often stood at the mine's entrance, feeling the weight of history and the unbreakable spirit of those who had perished. The past and present converged in the quiet Appalachian air, a solemn testament to resilience, justice, and the enduring hope that no sacrifice would ever be forgotten. Years after the initial revelation, the story of Blackwater Mine had become an enduring symbol of resilience and justice that transcended the boundaries of Matewan, embedding itself deeply into the national dialogue about industrial transparency and workers' rights. The community that had once been silenced by tragedy now rose as a beacon for change, its scars transformed into a source of strength and unity. Danny Morrison, who had embarked on this journey as a young sheriff uncertain of the path ahead, emerged as a respected leader and advocate. His dedication to honoring his grandfather's memory and seeking justice for the 17 miners evolved into a lifelong mission that inspired countless others. With relentless determination, Danny collaborated with lawmakers, mining safety organizations, and labor unions to spearhead reforms aimed at preventing similar tragedies. His voice became a fixture in legislative halls where new laws were crafted, laws that mandated rigorous safety regulations, corporate transparency, and accountability measures that exceeded previous standards. The acceptance of whistleblowers and protections for them radically shifted corporate culture, encouraging workers to report hazards without fear of retaliation. Educational initiatives flourished, commemorating the sacrifices of the miners and instilling awareness in younger generations. Museums dedicated to mining history opened their doors, featuring extensive exhibits that chronicled the Blackwater tragedy and the battle that followed. Annual memorial ceremonies became occasions for collective remembrance, healing, and affirmation of community. Families once fractured by grief now found solace in shared narratives and mutual support, preserving the memories of lost loved ones beyond the pages of dusty records. Yet, Danny was always soberly aware that the fight was far from over. Behind the veil of transparency and reform, powerful interests continued to seek ways to evade scrutiny, employing subtle tactics to silence dissent and manipulate narratives. Despite the passage of time, rumors of clandestine operations and unexplained disappearances in other mining regions maintained a shadow over the industry. Danny persisted in his vigilance, mentoring new advocates and collaborating with journalists exposing ongoing malpractices. His own family, once wary of his obsession, embraced the cause, forming a tight-knit network dedicated to sustaining momentum for justice. On quiet evenings, Danny found himself standing at the gate of the Blackwater Mine Memorial, the setting sun casting long shadows through the mountain trees. The chilling silence that once signified loss and concealment now felt sacred, a hallowed space for truth and remembrance. The air was tinged with the faintest whispers of those who had labored and died beneath the earth, their stories no longer silenced but celebrated. In those moments, Danny understood the profound legacy left by the miners, a testament to courage, an enduring call to conscience, and a reminder that no darkness could permanently obscure the light of justice. The Blackwater Mine was no longer just a chapter of sorrow. It was an epic of human resilience, an unfinished story of relentless pursuit, and a beacon for all who dare to seek truth amidst shadows. As the decades unfolded following the harrowing revelations surrounding Blackwater Mine, the impact of the tragedy and the subsequent quest for justice rippled far beyond the confines of Matewan, resonating across the nation and into the hearts of those who value truth and accountability. The narrative transformed from a localized tale of loss into a paradigm of courage, perseverance, and the indefatigable human spirit standing against vast and shadowy powers. Danny Morrison, once a young sheriff confronted with cryptic files and whispered secrets, had matured into a pioneering advocate whose efforts became synonymous with the broader movement for workers' rights and corporate transparency. His tireless dedication sparked coalitions comprising lawyers, journalists, historians, and activists, all united by the mission to prevent such betrayals from recurring. Legislative reforms followed in the wake of public outcry, compelling lawmakers to enact sweeping changes that fortified mine safety standards, ensured transparent reporting of industrial hazards, and reinforced protections for whistleblowers who risked everything to expose corruption. These measures brought tangible improvements, saving lives and restoring a measure of faith in the systems meant to safeguard workers. Educational and cultural initiatives blossomed, with schools across Appalachia incorporating the Blackwater story into their curricula, teaching new generations about the price of complacency and the power of collective action. Museums and memorials dedicated to the miners and their families became pilgrimage sites, where visitors glimpsed the blending of sorrow and strength woven into the landscape. Survivors and the descendants of the lost gathered regularly, sharing their stories, offering mutual support, and championing causes to ensure that no family would endure such silence again. Yet, Danny remained vigilant, conscious that the forces which once conspired in darkness adapted with time. He continued to work alongside investigative journalists uncovering ongoing malpractices, corporate cover-ups, and government complacency in industries beyond mining. His efforts extended into mentorship, guiding emerging advocates and helping build networks that champion justice across sectors. The transformation of Blackwater Mine from a sealed tomb of silence into a symbol of transparency and vigilance was not merely a local victory, but a beacon illuminating broader struggles against systemic injustice. On quiet mountain evenings, as the sun dipped behind the Appalachians and the air turned crisp with the promise of autumn, Danny often returned to the mine's entrance. The place that once whispered echoes of tragedy now sang a song of remembrance and hope, wildflowers blooming amid the rusted rails, and the names of the 17 men etched in stone serving as an eternal testament. Danny would stand silently, feeling the presence of those who had vanished, their spirits intertwined with the land they had toiled. His mind would drift to his grandfather, a man whose steadfast integrity had set this journey in motion, and to the countless others who, though lost, had ignited a flame that no darkness could extinguish. The legacy of Blackwater Mine became a charge passed down, an imperative to guard the light of justice vigilantly, to speak for the silenced, and to build a future where truth prevails over secrecy and human dignity triumphs over greed. It was the story of a community's pain and redemption, a nation's reckoning, and the enduring power of one man's resolve to honor the past by illuminating the path ahead. As the years turned into decades, the story of Blackwater Mine became woven deeply into the fabric of Matewan's identity and rippled far beyond its mountainous borders into the national consciousness. What began as a quiet tragedy, hidden beneath layers of coal dust and official silence, erupted into a powerful narrative of resilience, justice, and unyielding determination. Danny Morrison's personal quest transformed into a lifelong mission that inspired a movement, a call to confront injustice, and demand transparency in industries long protected by secrecy and influence. His tireless advocacy helped spark legislative reforms, reshaping mining safety laws with stricter regulations, mandatory inspections, and enhanced safeguards for workers. The legal victories in court battles sent shockwaves through corporate boardrooms, dissuading negligent practices and ushering in an era where accountability could no longer be quietly bought or buried. Educational programs sprung up in schools across Appalachia, ensuring that the stories of the lost miners and the lessons from Blackwater would be passed on, empowering new generations to stand against exploitation. Museums and memorials erected in honor of the 17 miners became hallowed grounds where families and strangers alike gathered to remember, mourn, and celebrate courage that transcended death. The healing process was complex and ongoing. Many families who had carried the weight of uncertainty and grief found new strength in shared stories and rebuilding broken bonds. Support networks blossomed, providing resources for trauma recovery and advocating for righteous treatment of affected communities. Yet even amid progress, shadows of past corruption lingered. Powerful interests, though diminished, continued to resist full disclosure, wielding influence to delay investigations and cloud public understanding. Danny, now seasoned by decades of struggle, remained a vigilant guardian, mentoring a new generation of truth seekers and activists dedicated to unmasking deceit wherever it hides. He knew that justice was never final. It required constant defense and courage to uncover inconvenient truths. On quiet nights, standing at the entrance of the mine converted into a revered memorial, Danny felt the presence of those 17 souls, their silent witness etched into every stone and whispering wind. The air, once heavy with pain and secrecy, now carried the fragile but unbreakable hope of redemption and remembrance. Looking toward the horizon where the Appalachian Mountains met the fading light, Danny whispered a vow, a promise to honor their sacrifice by ensuring that no darkness, no matter how deep, could ever again hide the truth from those who seek it. The Blackwater Mine was not just a story of loss and betrayal. It was a living testament to the enduring power of justice, the strength of community, and the unquenchable flame of hope that burns within the human spirit. And as long as that flame endured, their memory would never fade, their voices would never be silenced, and the fight for a brighter tomorrow would march on unrelenting. Decades have passed since the tragic events at Blackwater Mine, yet its weight continues to linger, shaping the lives of many and echoing throughout the broader conversation on justice and accountability. The sacrifices of the 17 miners who lost their lives beneath the earth were never forgotten. Instead, their story became a cornerstone for change, a powerful testament to the enduring human spirit and the necessity of standing firm against injustice. Danny Morrison's tireless efforts to uncover the truth transformed him from a grieving sheriff into a national voice advocating for workers, families, and the vulnerable. Through his leadership, sweeping reforms reshaped mining regulations, introducing stringent safety standards and compelling greater transparency from corporations and government bodies alike. The enforcement of these reforms ensured that mine workers' lives were protected with unprecedented vigilance, reducing the likelihood of unchecked hazards and negligence. The site of the Blackwater Mine was no longer a mere relic of tragedy. It was reborn as a solemn memorial and educational center. Here, visitors from near and far gathered to honor the memory of those lost, paying respects at the stone monuments etched with each miner's name, listening to stories of courage, and reflecting on a history that was as painful as it was instructive. Local schools embraced the legacy of Blackwater Mine, weaving its lessons into curricula designed to inspire awareness, responsibility, and activism among young students. Art, literature, and music commemorated the miners' bravery, ensuring their stories transcended generations, immortalizing both their lives and the enduring fight for justice they symbolize. Yet, even as progress flourished, the shadows of resistance remained. Powerful entities sought to influence narratives subtly, striving to suppress inconvenient truths and delay full reckoning. Danny, however, remained vigilant, continuing to mentor advocates and collaborate with investigative journalists dedicated to unveiling hidden injustices wherever they may lie. His commitment underscored a fundamental truth, that justice is not a destination, but a continuous journey, demanding courage and vigilance from every generation. On quiet, reflective evenings, Danny would return to the mine's entrance, now embraced by wildflowers and framed by the majestic Appalachians. The cool mountain breeze carried the whispers of those who had labored and fallen there, their memories etched forever into the very soul of the earth. With reverence and resolve, he would whisper a vow to honor their legacy by guarding the light of truth, standing resolute against darkness, and inspiring all who would listen to carry forward the torch of justice. The Blackwater Mine story, once shrouded in silence and sorrow, had become a living, breathing legacy, one that illuminated the power of truth, the resilience of community, and the unyielding hope that even in the darkest places, justice can prevail. Years after the Blackwater Mine tragedy had been exposed, the community of Matewan found itself forever changed. The scars of loss and betrayal remained, but so did a newfound strength born from truth and solidarity. Families once fractured by grief now gathered together in remembrance and support, honoring the 17 miners whose lives had been extinguished in darkness, but whose legacy now shone as a beacon of courage and justice. Memorials built near the mine site became places of pilgrimage, where stories were shared and the lessons of silence and resistance were passed down to new generations. Danny Morrison continued his tireless work, advocating not only for miner safety, but for broader reforms in government transparency and corporate ethics. His efforts helped to initiate nationwide investigations into similar incidents across industries, sparking dialogues that challenged powerful institutions to be held accountable. Educational programs flourished, incorporating the miner's story into school curricula and community workshops, inspiring young minds to value integrity and the courage to speak out. Despite ongoing challenges from entrenched interests seeking to suppress uncomfortable truths, the spirit of Blackwater endured. Danny's commitment to justice inspired countless others, creating a network of advocates determined to prevent history from repeating. As the sun set over the Appalachian Mountains, Danny often stood by the mine's entrance, feeling the weight of history and hope intertwined. The earth beneath held stories of pain and sacrifice, but also of resilience, and the promise that no truth, no matter how deeply buried, could ever be silenced forever. Blackwater Mine had become more than a site of tragedy. It was a testament to the human spirit's capacity for justice, remembrance, and the unbreakable bonds of community. In the years following the uncovering of the Blackwater Mine conspiracy, Matewan transformed from a town marked by tragedy into a symbol of resilience and hope. The community, once haunted by silence, now embraced its painful history to build a future grounded in truth and justice. Families who had long suffered in isolation found strength in unity, forming support networks that celebrated their loved ones' memories and advocated for miners' rights nationwide. Danny Morrison became a revered figure, not merely for his role as sheriff, but as a relentless champion for transparency and accountability. His advocacy helped catalyze sweeping reforms that elevated mining safety standards and fortified protections for workers who dared to stand against corporate negligence. Museums, memorials, and educational programs dedicated to the Blackwater victims educated generations about the grave costs of greed and silence, inspiring ongoing movements for workers' justice and corporate responsibility. Despite ongoing challenges from powerful entities reluctant to relinquish control, the spirit of Blackwater persisted. Its legacy served as a beacon, urging vigilance and courage in the ongoing quest for justice. For Danny, every visit to the now sacred mine site was a solemn reminder that even the darkest secrets, when met with relentless truth-seeking, can illuminate pathways toward healing and redemption. The earth beneath Blackwater no longer held only sorrow, but embodied the enduring power of a community determined to remember, to fight, and to protect the dignity of all who labor in the shadows. As the years rolled on, the legacy of Blackwater Mine evolved into a powerful catalyst for change that resonated far beyond the rugged hills of Matewan. The community, once mired in grief and silence, harnessed its collective sorrow and determination to carve out a future founded on truth, justice, and unwavering remembrance. Danny Morrison's relentless pursuit of answers transformed him from a solitary sheriff wrestling with family secrets into a national beacon for transparency, workers' rights, and corporate accountability. His story inspired a new generation of activists, lawyers, and investigators dedicated to unraveling hidden injustices across various industries and regions. The physical site of Blackwater Mine, once a sealed tomb harboring pain and deception, became a hallowed ground of remembrance. Memorials were erected, meticulously inscribed with the names of the 17 miners, their stories etched into stone and hearts alike. Annual ceremonies brought together survivors, descendants, and supporters, creating a sanctuary of collective healing. Educational institutions incorporated the Blackwater story into their curricula, ensuring that schools taught not only mining history, but also the critical importance of courage, ethical stewardship, and the consequences of silence. Danny's efforts extended well beyond Matewan's borders. He collaborated with lawmakers, helping to draft and advocate for landmark legislation that revamped mine safety standards, mandated comprehensive corporate disclosures, and instituted robust protections for whistleblowers. The reforms reflected a paradigm shift, a society unwilling to allow the shadows of profit-driven negligence to claim more lives. His advocacy also contributed to the establishment of dedicated funds providing healthcare, counseling, and financial assistance to families of miners nationwide, acknowledging the enduring toll such tragedies impose. Journalists and documentary filmmakers embraced Blackwater's narrative, amplifying voices and exposing similar patterns of negligence and cover-ups elsewhere. The resulting wave of public pressure forced corporations and government agencies into greater transparency and responsiveness. Despite the advances, Danny remained pragmatic and vigilant, aware that entrenched interests often adapt and seek new means to obscure the truth. He mentored emerging advocates, helping to build a resilient network committed to ongoing oversight and justice. On reflective evenings, Danny would return to the mine's entrance, where wildflowers now bloomed amid rusted rails and weathered concrete. Beneath the vast Appalachian night sky, he felt the presence of those lost miners, their sacrifices no longer hidden, but honored in a community transformed. The earth beneath Blackwater Mine held not only the weight of tragedy, but the enduring spark of hope, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Danny's whispered promises to the wind carried the pledge of remembrance and the belief that no darkness, no matter how deep, could dim the flame of truth forever. The story of Blackwater Mine stands as a timeless testament of courage against oppression, of light piercing through shadow, and of the enduring power of one man's resolve to champion the forgotten. In the decades following the Blackwater Mine tragedy, the story that once simmered in whispers became an enduring anthem of courage, accountability, and community resilience. Matewan, a town forever altered by loss and betrayal, transformed itself into a living memorial, not merely preserving the memory of the 17 miners who perished, but using their story as a beacon illuminating the path toward justice and reform. Danny Morrison's relentless quest to unearth the truth was no longer just a personal crusade. It evolved into a beacon that guided a nationwide reckoning with industrial negligence and systemic corruption. The mine itself, long sealed and shrouded in silence, was restored as a historical site and education center, welcoming visitors eager to bear witness and learn. Walking among the rusted equipment, weathered tunnels, and carefully maintained memorials, people could feel the weight of generations past, a stark reminder of the human cost behind profit and secrecy. Leaning heavily into education and communal healing, Matewan established programs that reached far beyond repealing regulations. They fostered awareness, compassion, and empowerment. Schools taught the miner stories with reverence, not as isolated tragedies, but as essential lessons in ethics, stewardship, and civic responsibility. Art, music, and literature blossomed, inspired by themes of sacrifice, silence broken, and resilience. Local artists crafted poignant memorials. Poets penned odes steeped in loss and hope, ensuring the miners' spirits would linger in the cultural heartbeat of Appalachia. Danny's role expanded as well. He became an influential advocate, traveling to state capitals and national forums to champion workers' rights and corporate transparency. His speeches, often punctuated by personal memories of his grandfather and the miners, stirred lawmakers, activists, and citizens alike to demand change. Legislative victories soon followed: stronger mining safety laws, mandatory transparency protocols, protections for whistleblowers, and increased funding for enforcement agencies. Mining companies were held accountable as never before, forced to adopt rigorous safety practices and transparent reporting, shifting the culture of an industry too often cloaked in darkness. Yet, Danny understood that the battle for justice was ongoing. The forces that once concealed Blackwater's truth had not vanished, but evolved, embedding themselves deeper within the fabric of power and influence. New threats emerged: corporate cover-ups in other sectors, threats against activists in attempts to rewrite history. Ever vigilant, Danny mentored the next generation of truth seekers, lawyers, journalists, community leaders, arming them with knowledge, courage, and unwavering resolve. Standing on the hill overlooking the Memorial Park, where wildflowers swayed and fresh names were added yearly, Danny often felt the profound presence of those 17 men. Their quiet bravery, hidden for so long beneath layers of dust and deceit, now pulsed in the vibrant life of a community reborn. The Appalachian air carried the stories of sacrifice and solemn promises that no secret, no matter how deeply buried, could escape the light of justice, and no voice, no matter how silenced, could be truly lost. Blackwater Mine's legacy was not just a chapter in history, it was the enduring spirit of resilience, a living testament that truth, when pursued with steadfast heart and unbreakable will forever illuminate even the darkest tunnels. In the years that followed the unraveling of the Blackwater Mine tragedy, Matewan emerged as a symbol of courage and transformation, its identity forever intertwined with the memory of those 17 miners whose lives had been claimed by greed and silence. The community, once fractured by grief and buried secrets, found strength in unity and activism, forging a legacy marked not only by remembrance, but by decisive action. Danny Morrison, whose relentless pursuit of the truth had spanned decades, became a revered figure, known far beyond the borders of his small Appalachian town, as a tireless advocate for justice, transparency, and workers' rights. The mine itself, which had long been a sealed tomb of unspoken horrors, was reborn as a hallowed site of education and reflection. Visitors from across the country and the world journeyed to Matewan to walk its grounds, now transformed into a memorial park, surrounded by wild forests and mountain air. The robust educational programs established there bore fruit in classrooms where students learned not just about mining history, but about ethics, civic responsibility, and the enduring power of community strength. Art installations and local performances commemorated the miners' courage, weaving their stories into the cultural fabric of the region and inspiring new generations to cherish justice and fight oppression. Danny expanded his advocacy beyond local action, partnering with national organizations that championed workers' protections and corporate accountability. He testified before legislative bodies, sharing firsthand accounts that lent urgency to policy changes. Gradually, laws were enacted demanding rigorous safety regulations, mandatory transparency in resource extraction industries, and protections for whistleblowers. Mining companies, once shielded by silence and influence, faced unprecedented scrutiny, compelled to prioritize human life over profit. Yet, Danny's vigilance never waned. The forces that had orchestrated the initial cover-up had evolved, taking new forms and continuing to cloak their actions in secrecy. He mentored emerging activists, equipping them with the tools and resolve needed to carry forward the struggle for truth and justice. Amid political and social challenges, his work underscored an essential truth. The fight against corruption is ongoing, requiring steadfast courage in every generation. On quiet evenings, Danny returned to the mine's entrance, now bathed in the golden hues of sunset and framed by rugged Appalachian peaks. The air carried whispers of the past, of hard-working miners whose courage had refused to be extinguished. Standing amid the wildflowers and memorial stones, he felt the weight of history and the promise of continued vigilance. The Blackwater Mine had transcended tragedy. It had become a beacon, illuminating the enduring power of truth, justice, and the unbreakable bonds of community. As long as its story was told and its lessons remembered, no darkness could ever truly silence the voices of those who had sacrificed so much. The legacy of Blackwater Mine was a timeless testament that courage prevails, hope endures, and justice, though delayed, is never denied. In the decades after the Blackwater Mine tragedy, the reverberations of that dark chapter continued to shape Matewan and stretch far beyond its mountainous borders. The town, once cloaked in sorrow and silence, found renewed purpose and strength in the relentless pursuit of justice and community healing. Danny Morrison's journey, beginning as a young sheriff haunted by family secrets, transformed into a lifetime dedicated to truth and advocacy. His tireless efforts brought national attention to the saga, inspiring legislative reforms and igniting a broader movement demanding transparency and accountability in industries long shielded by power and influence. The mine itself, once sealed and abandoned, was reimagined as a memorial park and educational center. Visitors came from various walks of life to pay homage to the 17 miners, learn their stories, and reflect on the profound consequences of ignored safety and silenced voices. Educational institutions incorporated the tragic history into their curricula, teaching lessons on ethics, activism, and the enduring importance of community solidarity. Public art and cultural events celebrated the miners' courage and the community's resilience, ensuring the legacy remained alive and meaningful for generations to come. Danny's advocacy extended beyond Appalachian Hills. He partnered with national organizations, sharing lessons learned, contributing to landmark policy changes that revolutionized mine safety standards and corporate responsibility frameworks. These reforms introduced stronger protections for workers and whistleblowers, creating avenues for accountability previously denied for decades. Despite these advancements, the struggle was far from over. Entrenched interests adapted, continuing efforts to conceal wrongdoing and resist systemic accountability. Yet, Danny's vigilance never faltered, his generation passing the torch to new activists equipped with resolve and knowledge to continue the fight. On tranquil evenings, Danny often returned to the memorial site, feeling the weight of history and the spirit of those lost. The Appalachian breeze carried whispers of sacrifice and hope, binding past and present. The Blackwater Mine, once a symbol of darkness and betrayal, had become a beacon of courage, justice, and enduring community strength. Its story stood as a powerful reminder that even the deepest secrets, when met with unyielding truth, cannot remain buried forever. Through remembrance and action, the voices of those 17 miners continue to inspire, a testament to the lasting power of justice and the resilience of the human spirit. In the long years following the Blackwater Mine disaster, the impact of that tragic event continued to reverberate not only through the Appalachian community of Matewan, but also across the nation, igniting a powerful movement dedicated to justice, remembrance, and reform. What had begun as a heartbreaking loss, concealed beneath layers of silence and deceit, unfolded into a compelling narrative of resilience and unwavering determination. The once silent town found its voice, transforming grief and anger into a collective force that demanded accountability from corporations, government entities, and the very systems that had allowed such a tragedy to be buried for decades. Danny Morrison, who had first stepped into this fight as a young sheriff seeking answers about his grandfather's death, evolved into a leading figure in a broader crusade for transparency and workers' rights. His dedication extended beyond the investigation, becoming a lifelong commitment to advocate for families who had been ignored and to push for sweeping reforms in mining safety and corporate governance. Through tireless lobbying efforts and public speaking engagements, Danny helped inspire the passage of landmark legislation that required stricter regulations, more rigorous safety standards, and mandatory disclosures about hazardous working conditions. These laws empowered whistleblowers, protected workers, and held powerful interests to account like never before. The physical site of Blackwater Mine was transformed from a place of silent suffering into one of active memory and education. A memorial park now serves as a sanctuary for families, residents, and visitors alike. A place where the 17 miners who lost their lives are honored with dignity and reverence. Educational initiatives flourished, bringing the story of Blackwater into classrooms to teach lessons about courage, ethical responsibility, and the costs of corporate neglect. Art, music, and storytelling became powerful vehicles to preserve the miners' legacy and inspire new generations to stand against injustice. Despite these victories, Danny remained vigilant, fully aware that the forces enabling such tragedies often resurface in new guises. He dedicated countless hours mentoring emerging activists, working with investigative journalists, and fostering networks committed to transparency across industries. Challenges persisted, with powerful entities resisting full disclosure and reform, but the spirit ignited by Blackwater's story continued to spread, encouraging communities everywhere to demand better protections and accountability. On quiet evenings, standing at the mine's entrance, amidst blooming wildflowers and towering Appalachian trees, Danny contemplated the journey that had brought him here. The pain of loss was still palpable, but so was the strength forged through struggle and solidarity. The Blackwater Mine was no longer a forgotten wound, but a living testament to resilience, an enduring call to action that justice, while sometimes delayed, can never be denied. In honoring those 17 men, their sacrifice has become a beacon, lighting the way for all who fight for truth, safety, and dignity in the face of overwhelming odds. This legacy, born from sorrow, continues to inspire hope and courage for generations yet to come. In the many years following the exposure of the Blackwater Mine disaster, its impact grew far beyond the borders of Matewan, embedding itself deeply in the national consciousness as a poignant symbol of the fight for justice, transparency, and human dignity. The scars left by the tragedy ran deep, yet they sparked a remarkable transformation within a community once gripped by sorrow and silence. The grieving families of the 17 miners slowly found solace not only in remembrance, but in the strength that comes from unity and purpose. Under the leadership of Danny Morrison, a man whose personal loss fueled a relentless pursuit of truth, Matewan evolved from a quiet Appalachian town into a beacon of hope and advocacy. Danny's journey from a young sheriff haunted by whispers and secrets to a formidable advocate for workers' rights and accountability became emblematic of the broader struggles faced by countless communities impacted by industrial negligence. His unwavering dedication inspired legislative reforms that fundamentally reshaped mining laws, establishing stricter safety standards, more rigorous inspections, and enhanced corporate transparency. Protections for whistleblowers were strengthened, ensuring those who dared to challenge powerful interests would be shielded from retaliation. These reforms reverberated beyond Appalachia, influencing policies and practices nationwide and setting new standards for corporate responsibility. The physical landscape of Blackwater Mine was transformed to reflect this new era of remembrance and education. Where once lay a sealed and silent tomb, now stood a memorial park of serene beauty, a place where names were etched in stone, stories told with reverence, and the lessons of sacrifice and resilience passed on. Educational programs incorporated the Blackwater narrative into curricula across the country, teaching young minds about the dangers of complacency and the power of community action. Public art and cultural festivals celebrated the miners' lives, weaving their memory into the vibrant fabric of regional and national identity. Danny's role extended well beyond Matewan. He became a mentor and leader within a growing coalition of activists, journalists, and legal experts committed to unveiling corruption and ensuring justice in various industries. His work helped give voice to other forgotten tragedies and inspired a new generation to stand vigilantly against abuses of power. Although challenges persisted, with powerful interests continually seeking to obscure inconvenient truths, the spirit ignited by Blackwater's story remained unbroken, a living testament to the enduring fight for justice. On quiet evenings, Danny often found himself at the entrance of the mine, surrounded by the gentle rustling of Appalachian trees and the delicate bloom of wildflowers. In those moments, he felt the profound presence of the 17 men whose lives had been unjustly taken. Their stories had ceased to be whispers buried beneath the earth, and instead had become a clarion call, a reminder that even the darkest secrets would, in time, be brought to light. The Blackwater Mine was no longer merely a chapter of tragedy, but an epic of resilience, community, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. Danny's whispered solemn promises to the wind carried the hope that the legacy of sacrifice would forever inspire vigilance, courage, and the unwavering belief that justice, regardless of how delayed, would ultimately prevail. Over the many decades that followed the exposure of the Blackwater Mine tragedy, its profound legacy expanded far beyond the quiet hills of Matewan, evolving into a powerful symbol of perseverance, reckoning, and hope that resonated across the nation. The small Appalachian town, once cloaked in grief and silence, became a testament to the strength that emerges when a community refuses to accept injustice and works tirelessly to transform pain into progress. At the heart of this transformation was Danny Morrison, whose personal quest to uncover the truth about his grandfather and the 17 lost miners developed into a relentless crusade for justice, transparency, and human dignity. Danny's evolution from a sheriff burdened by family secrets to a national advocate reflected the broader struggle of innumerable communities impacted by industrial negligence and cover-ups. His tireless pursuit galvanized lawmakers, activists, and ordinary citizens alike, leading to groundbreaking reforms in mining safety regulations, corporate accountability, and whistleblower protections. These changes marked a historic pivot, where once the powerful had operated in shadows, now stringent standards and oversight agencies demanded transparency and prioritized human life. Companies were compelled to adopt safer practices, and workers gained stronger voices protected by law. The physical site of the Blackwater Mine underwent a profound rebirth. No longer a sealed crypt of loss and silence, it became an educational center and memorial park that welcomed visitors seeking to honor and learn. Granite monuments stood tall, inscribed with each miner's name, while interactive exhibits and educational programs imparted lessons about ethics, community responsibility, and the cost of complacency. Schools across Appalachia and throughout the country integrated these stories into their curricula, empowering new generations to advocate for justice and human rights. Artistic expressions, paintings, sculptures, music, and literature flourished, weaving the miners' memories into the cultural fabric and ensuring that their sacrifices were immortalized in diverse and moving ways. Danny's work extended well beyond local advocacy. He forged partnerships with journalists exposing hidden injustices, legal experts fighting systemic corruption, and activists building coalitions that demanded ongoing vigilance. Despite the victories, the battle against those who sought to conceal truths and evade accountability continued. Entrenched interests adapted their strategies, presenting new challenges, but the movement sparked by Blackwater's revelation had become resilient and multifaceted, a living force that would not be easily silenced. In quieter moments, Danny often returned to the mine's entrance, surrounded by the serene beauty of Appalachian forests and blooming wildflowers. There, beneath the vast expanse of starlit sky, he felt the enduring presence of those 17 miners, their courage and sacrifice etched deeply into the land and hearts of their community. No longer were their stories whispers lost beneath dust and secrecy. They had risen as a powerful testament to the truth's unyielding light. Blackwater Mine's legacy became more than a tragic memory. It became a beacon for all who fight against injustice, a reminder that with steadfast courage, even the darkest tunnels of human history can be illuminated by hope, resilience, and justice. Danny's whispered vow carried on the mountain wind that their sacrifice would inspire vigilance and courage forever, ensuring that their voices would never again fall silent and that the pursuit of truth would endure through all generations to come. The story of Blackwater Mine, once a hidden and painful secret buried deep within the Appalachian earth, evolved over the years into a powerful legacy that embodied courage, justice, and the unbreakable resilience of community. What began as a devastating tragedy that claimed the lives of 17 miners gradually transformed into a beacon of hope and change that echoed far beyond the small town of Matewan. At the center of this transformation stood Danny Morrison, whose personal journey to uncover the truth about his grandfather and those lost miners inspired a nationwide movement for accountability, transparency, and reform. Danny's tireless efforts fueled dramatic changes in mining laws and corporate regulations, ensuring that the safety of workers could no longer be sacrificed for profit or hidden behind layers of silence. His advocacy helped introduce stronger whistleblower protections, guaranteeing that those brave enough to speak out were no longer left vulnerable to retaliation. Beyond legislative victories, the legacy of Blackwater permeated educational institutions, where schools incorporated the miner's story to teach generations about the consequences of negligence and the vital importance of standing up for justice. Memorials and cultural projects emerged as tangible tributes to the miners' courage, offering spaces for grieving families, community members, and visitors to reflect, remember, and honor the sacrifices made. Despite these progressions, the fight was far from over. The shadows of corruption and secrecy continued to challenge reformers, as entrenched interests sought new strategies to evade scrutiny. Danny, ever vigilant, extended his work by mentoring a new generation of advocates, collaborating with journalists to uncover fresh injustices, and fostering a community committed to transparency and ethical accountability. His legacy became a living movement, rooted in the belief that the pursuit of truth and justice is a continual endeavor, requiring relentless dedication. On serene evenings, when the Appalachian sky stretched wide and the air was tinged with the freshness of blooming wildflowers, Danny would often stand at the entrance of the Blackwater Mine Memorial. There, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the weight of history, he felt the presence of those 17 miners, their lives cut short but their spirits enduring. Their story, once mired in silence, now shone as a guiding light, reminding all who heard it that even the darkest secrets can be brought into the light through courage and perseverance. The Blackwater Mine had transcended tragedy, becoming a testament to the enduring power of truth, community solidarity, and the unyielding hope for justice. Danny's whispered promise to the winds carried across the mountains, a vow that the memories of the miners would be honored forever, and their sacrifice would inspire the fight for truth for generations to come. This legacy, born from sorrow but sustained by resolve, stands as a beacon for all who dare to confront injustice and champion the cause of human dignity. In the many years that unfolded after the harrowing tragedy of Blackwater Mine was finally brought to light, the small Appalachian town of Matewan underwent a profound transformation, evolving into a living symbol of resilience, justice, and the enduring power of community. The miners whose lives had been lost beneath layers of coal and secrecy were no longer invisible victims consigned to silence. Thanks largely to the relentless dedication of Danny Morrison, whose unwavering quest for truth had faced immense opposition and hardship, their stories emerged from the shadows to inspire not just Matewan, but a nation grappling with the dark consequences of industrial negligence and deceit. The sacrifices of those 17 men catalyzed an extraordinary movement toward reform and accountability. New legislation rewrote mining safety laws, imposing stricter regulations designed to protect workers from the kind of dangers that had long been ignored or concealed. Corporate accountability was no longer a distant ideal, but a core legal principle enforced by robust policies, transparency mandates, and harsher penalties for violations. Crucially, protections for whistleblowers were strengthened, giving voice and security to those courageous enough to expose misconduct, thereby preventing history from repeating its darkest mistakes. These reforms resonated far beyond the minds of Matewan, influencing industries and regulatory bodies across the country to prioritize human well-being over unchecked profit. The physical space of the Blackwater Mine itself was transformed into a hallowed site of remembrance and education. The once sealed, haunted corridors were replaced by a memorial park rich with symbolism, monuments bearing the names of the fallen, carefully tended gardens, and spaces designed for reflection and healing. Educational programs sprouted both locally and nationally, embedding the narrative of Blackwater into school curricula to ensure future generations understood the critical importance of courage, vigilance, and the collective power to demand justice. The arts embraced the story as well. Painters, musicians, and writers found inspiration in the miners' bravery and the community's resolve, their works keeping the memory alive and urging society to remain vigilant. Danny Morrison's role grew beyond that of a local hero to become a respected national figure in advocacy for worker safety, ethical governance, and transparency. He traveled extensively, lending his voice to legislative hearings, conferences, and grassroots organizations seeking to expose injustices and drive reform. He mentored countless activists, journalists, and legal professionals, sharing the lessons learned from Blackwater and emphasizing that the pursuit of justice is a marathon, not a sprint. Though powerful interests continued to resist change and engage in efforts to conceal truths, the movement ignited by Blackwater's exposure proved indomitable and persistent. In quieter moments, Danny often found himself standing at the entrance of the memorial site, beneath the vast Appalachian sky filled with stars and the scent of fresh mountain air. The once tragic mine, now surrounded by blooming wildflowers and peaceful trees, bore witness not just to loss but to extraordinary redemption. There he could feel the enduring presence of the 17 miners, men who had faced insurmountable odds and, though silenced in life, had inspired generations after them to stand unwaveringly for truth and dignity. The legacy of Blackwater Mine transcended its painful beginnings, becoming a beacon of hope, a call to vigilance, and a living testament to the power of justice when pursued with unwavering courage. Danny's whispered promises to carry their story forward echoed on the mountain winds, a solemn vow that the sacrifices made would never be forgotten, and that the flame of truth would forever burn bright in the hearts of all who seek justice against the darkest of odds. Decades after the dark and tragic events that unfolded within the depths of Blackwater Mine, the impact of this devastating chapter continued to resonate profoundly, both within the small Appalachian community of Matewan and throughout the broader national landscape. What had once been a sealed secret, buried under layers of silence, fear, and corruption, was transformed into a powerful narrative of courage, unwavering justice, and communal strength that defied the passage of time. The miners, 17 brave souls whose lives were cut short beneath the unforgiving earth, were no longer forgotten casualties, but symbols of resilience and the relentless pursuit of truth. At the center of this transformation stood Danny Morrison, a man whose personal journey from a young sheriff steeped in family tragedies to a passionate advocate for workers and justice became the very heartbeat of a movement. His dogged determination to uncover the truth and hold those responsible accountable catalyzed not only a local awakening, but inspired a broader crusade against industrial neglect and systemic corruption. Danny's efforts reverberated far beyond Matewan, compelling lawmakers to institute sweeping reforms that revamped mine safety standards, increased corporate transparency, and introduced robust protections to safeguard whistleblowers who dared to speak out against wrongdoing. These legislative victories marked a pivotal shift in the nation's approach to industrial oversight, where once the voices of working people had been muffled by power and profit, now they were amplified and protected under the law. Companies were no longer permitted to ignore hazardous conditions or conceal the consequences of their negligence. Instead, rigorous safety protocols became mandatory, regulatory agencies gained unprecedented authority, and accountability became a cornerstone principle of corporate governance. This sweeping reform not only honored the lives lost at Blackwater, but fundamentally reshaped the future of countless workers across diverse industries. The physical landscape of Blackwater Mine evolved alongside this social transformation. What had been a sealed and forgotten tomb became a revered memorial park and educational landmark. The ground once stained with tragedy blossomed into a place of peace and reflection, a sanctuary where names were etched in granite, stories were shared with reverence, and generations came to learn the critical lessons born of sacrifice. Schools integrated Blackwater's history into their curricula, teaching students about the grave costs of silence and the lasting power of truth and solidarity. Art, literature, and music flourished around the narrative, providing cultural expressions of grief, hope, and the courage to confront injustice. Danny's role extended far beyond Matewan's borders. He emerged as a respected figure in a vast network of activists, legal experts, and journalists committed to exposing systemic abuses and championing justice. His mentorship helped nurture new advocates, equipping them with the knowledge and resolve needed to continue the fight against corruption and negligence. Despite the resistance posed by entrenched interests seeking to maintain the status quo, the movement sparked by Blackwater endured, adapting and growing stronger with each challenge faced. In moments of quiet reflection, Danny often returned to the entrance of the now sacred mine site. Beneath the expansive Appalachian sky, surrounded by wildflowers and rustling trees, he felt the enduring presence of the miners whose sacrifices had sparked this profound change. Their stories, once buried beneath dust and lies, had risen as a clarion call for truth, justice, and human dignity. The Blackwater Mine legacy transcended its origins as a painful tragedy. It became a beacon of hope and a testament to the incredible power of community, courage, and relentless pursuit of righteousness. Danny's whispered vows to carry their memory forward echoed like a solemn promise carried on the mountain winds, that their voices would never again be silenced, and the flame of justice would burn bright through every generation to come. This enduring legacy stands as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest tunnels of history, light will always find a way to break through. Decades after the harrowing events that shook Blackwater Mine, the story of that tragic chapter continued to resonate deeply, extending far beyond the rugged hills of Matewan and into the fabric of the nation's consciousness. What was once a buried secret, a dark stain hidden beneath coal dust and layers of deceit, had transformed into a profound testament to human resilience, justice, and communal strength. The 17 miners who lost their lives beneath the unforgiving earth were no longer mere statistics or forgotten names. They had become immortalized symbols of bravery and the unyielding pursuit of truth. At the core of this transformation was Danny Morrison, a man whose personal loss and unshakable determination had sparked a movement that changed the course of history, starting as a grieving sheriff haunted by the unanswered questions surrounding his grandfather's death. Danny's relentless quest to uncover the truth spurred a national reckoning with the dangerous consequences of corporate negligence and government complicity. His tireless advocacy energized lawmakers, activists, and ordinary citizens alike, culminating in sweeping reforms that redefined mining safety standards and corporate accountability nationwide. These legislative changes did more than tighten regulations. They established a new ethical framework in which protecting human life became paramount and transparency was non-negotiable. Crucially, whistleblower protections were fortified, shielding those brave enough to expose wrongdoing from retaliation and ensuring that the voices of workers could no longer be silenced. The reforms and cultural shifts driven by Blackwater's legacy extended across industries, making workplaces safer and fostering a culture of vigilance and responsibility. The mine itself was reborn, not as a place of darkness and despair, but as a memorial park and educational center that honored those lost with dignity and reverence. Families, descendants, and visitors gathered to remember and reflect, turning grief into collective healing. Schools integrated the miners' stories into educational curricula, teaching students the vital lessons of courage, communal responsibility, and the dangers of complacency. The arts also embraced these themes, with local and national artists creating poignant works that celebrated the miners' courage and the community's enduring spirit. Danny's influence extended even wider as he collaborated with journalists, legal experts, and advocacy groups dedicated to rooting out corruption and protecting workers everywhere. His mentoring of new generations of activists underscored the ongoing nature of the fight for justice, one that demands constant vigilance and resolve. Despite the progress made, Danny remained ever watchful. Powerful interests that once conspired to bury the truth had evolved their tactics, continuing to challenge reformers with new forms of deception and resistance. Yet the movement inspired by the Blackwater Mine tragedy proved resilient and adaptive, a living force that refused to be silenced. In quiet moments, Danny often returned to the mine's entrance, surrounded by the natural beauty of Appalachian wildflowers and towering trees. Beneath the vast expanse of starlit sky, he felt the enduring presence of the miners who had perished, their sacrifice a guiding light that illuminated even the darkest tunnels of history. Their stories, once submerged in silence and forgotten, had emerged as powerful beacons of hope, justice, and communal strength. The legacy of Blackwater Mine had transcended its origins as a site of sorrow and secrecy to become a symbol of courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Danny's whispered vows to carry their memory forward carried on the mountain winds, a solemn promise that their voices, though once silenced, would echo eternally, inspiring the unwavering defense of justice for all generations yet to come. This legacy stands as a profound reminder that, no matter how deep the darkness may seem, light and truth will always find a way to shine through. In the years and decades that followed the heartbreaking tragedy at Blackwater Mine, the story of those 17 miners who lost their lives evolved into a powerful legacy that resonated well beyond the contours of Matewan and the Appalachian Mountains. What had once been a dark secret buried beneath coal dust, silence, and deceit emerged as a compelling narrative of resilience, justice, and the enduring strength of community. The miners, once forgotten in the cold shadows of history, were transformed into symbols of courage, their sacrifices awakening a national movement that sought to confront the often hidden abuses of power lurking within industrial and governmental realms. At the heart of this profound transformation was Danny Morrison, a man whose personal loss and indefatigable determination carried him from the quiet streets of Matewan to the forefront of a nationwide crusade for truth and accountability. Beginning his journey as a sheriff haunted by the mysteries surrounding his grandfather's death and the unexplained mine disaster, Danny's relentless pursuit uncovered a web of corporate negligence, governmental complicity, and systemic corruption. His efforts not only brought justice to his community, but also ignited legislative reform, reshaping mining regulations across the country. New laws mandated stricter safety measures, required transparency from corporations, and extended legal protections to whistleblowers, ensuring those who expose wrongdoing would no longer suffer in silence or fear retaliation. These reforms signified a fundamental shift in societal attitudes and practices. Where once profit and secrecy overshadowed safety and truth, a new ethical standard prevailed, one where human life and dignity took precedence. The Blackwater Mine itself was transformed from a sealed chamber of sorrow into a sanctuary of memory and education. The once forgotten site became a vibrant memorial park, where solemn monuments and meticulously crafted exhibits told the miners' stories with reverence and care. Families, residents, and visitors gathered there to honor those who had paid the ultimate price and to reflect on the lessons etched deeply into the soil and spirit of the community. Education bore the weight of these lessons as schools incorporated the narrative into curricula aimed at fostering awareness, empathy, and activism among young people. Through these programs, students learn not only about the hazards of mining and industrial work, but also about the power of solidarity and the importance of speaking out against injustice. The arts further carried the torch. Local and national artists created evocative paintings, poetry, performances, and music that celebrated the miners' bravery and the community's resolve, providing cultural vehicles through which the legacy would flourish and inspire. Throughout this process, Danny Morrison's influence expanded far beyond his hometown. He became a mentor and leader within a vast network of activists, legal professionals, investigative journalists, and ordinary citizens committed to unearthing hidden wrongs and advocating for justice. He tirelessly supported those seeking to shine a light into dark corners of industries and governments, underscoring that the fight for accountability requires persistent courage and collective effort. Despite the victories, Danny remained vigilant, knowing that powerful interests resistant to transparency often adapt and evolve their tactics to maintain control and suppress dissent. On reflective evenings, Danny would find solace at the entrance of the Blackwater Mine Memorial, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the Appalachian wilderness, wildflowers blooming, the gentle rustle of leaves, and the expansive sky above. In these sacred moments, he felt the presence of those 17 souls, their spirits eternally intertwined with the land they had worked and loved. Their story, once muted by silence and oblivion, resounded now as a clarion call, a testament that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will rise. The Blackwater Mine legacy transcended tragedy, becoming a beacon of hope, resilience, and unwavering commitment to justice. Danny's whispered vows carried on the mountain air, promises to honor the fallen, to guard their memory, and to inspire generations yet unborn. This legacy endures as a profound reminder that in the darkest tunnels of history, the light of truth, courage, and unity will always find its way to shine. In the long years that unfolded after the devastating tragedy at Blackwater Mine, the story of those 17 miners who lost their lives beneath the Appalachian earth grew from a local sorrow into a national legacy marked by courage, justice, and transformative change. The coal dust and silence that once buried their fate were lifted through the perseverance of a community that refused to be silenced, and a man, Danny Morrison, whose personal loss forged him into a champion for truth and accountability. What had started as a quest to uncover the fate of his grandfather became a movement that illuminated systemic corruption, reshaped laws, and revived a spirit of resilience that continues to inspire. Danny's tireless journey took him from the modest streets of Matewan to the halls of power, where his firsthand testimony and advocacy helped rewrite mining safety standards and strengthen corporate oversight. New legislation mandated rigorous safety inspections, enforced transparency in resource extraction industries, and established robust protections for whistleblowers, measures that would safeguard thousands of workers nationwide. This wave of reform reached far beyond the coal fields, influencing regulatory practices in multiple sectors where human lives had been risked for profit. The narrative of Blackwater Mine became a cornerstone in the ongoing national conversation about workers' rights, ethical corporate governance, and the vital need for watchdog institutions. The site of Blackwater Mine itself underwent a profound transformation. No longer a sealed tomb marking loss and silence, it emerged as a memorial park and an educational hub. Families of the fallen miners found a sacred place to mourn and remember, while visitors and scholars came to grasp the human cost of negligence and secrecy. The park's monuments, inscribed with every miner's name, stood as solemn testimonies to their sacrifice, while interactive exhibits and guided tours helped convey the complex web of events that led to the disaster. Schools integrated Blackwater's history into their curricula, teaching students not only the dangers of neglect, but also the importance of courage, community, and activism. Art and culture blossomed around this shared history. Local poets, painters, and musicians found inspiration in the story, ensuring its lasting presence in the region's collective memory. Danny's advocacy extended far beyond Matewan's hills. He became a mentor and leader within a network of journalists, lawyers, community organizers, and activists dedicated to exposing injustice and protecting vulnerable workers everywhere. His guidance empowered new generations to continue the fight for transparency and justice in mining and other industries prone to abuse and cover-ups. Even as laws improved and awareness grew, Danny remained vigilant, understanding that entrenched interests often adapt and resort to more sophisticated tactics of concealment and intimidation. His work emphasized that the pursuit of justice is ongoing, requiring constant vigilance, solidarity, and courage. In the quiet hours of dusk, Danny often returned to the entrance of the memorial site. Surrounded by vivid wildflowers and the majestic silhouette of Appalachian peaks beneath a vast, starry sky, he felt the profound presence of those 17 miners, their lives and hopes now immortalized in the land, the community, and the story they helped rewrite. Their voices, once silenced beneath rubble and secrets, had become a clarion call for truth and justice, a beacon shining through the darkest tunnels of history. The Blackwater Mine legacy had transcended tragedy. It stood as an eternal testament to resilience, a rallying cry for transparency, and a promise that no sacrifice, no matter how deeply buried, could ever be forgotten. Danny's whispered vow, carried on the gentle mountain winds, pledged to carry their memory forward, ensuring that future generations would learn, remember, and continue the unyielding fight for a world where human life and dignity always prevail over greed and silence. In the years and decades that unfolded in the aftermath of the Blackwater Mine tragedy, the story of the 17 miners whose lives were lost beneath the Appalachian earth grew into a profound narrative of resilience, justice, and transformative change that reached far beyond the rugged hills of Matewan. Once buried under layers of coal dust, silence, and deception, their fate was unearthed through the unwavering determination of a community that refused to let their sacrifices be forgotten. Led by the relentless efforts of Danny Morrison, whose personal journey from grieving grandson to tireless truth seeker became the linchpin of a nationwide movement for accountability and workers' rights. Danny's journey, fueled by pain yet driven by hope, took him from the shadowed streets of Matewan to legislative halls and advocacy platforms across the country. His firsthand testimony and impassioned calls for justice galvanized lawmakers, activists, and ordinary citizens, resulting in sweeping reforms that redefined mining safety and corporate responsibility. New laws mandated rigorous safety protocols, increased corporate transparency, and critically, strengthened protections for whistleblowers, guarding those courageous enough to expose abuse from retaliation. These reforms transcended the coal industry, influencing policies in various sectors where workers' safety had been historically sacrificed for profit, helping to instill a new era of ethical governance and human dignity. The transformation of the physical site of Blackwater Mine mirrored that of the community's spirit. What was once a sealed, silent monument to loss and secrecy became a revered memorial park and educational center that drew visitors, families, and scholars eager to honor the fallen and learn from the past. Granite monuments etched with each miner's name stood proudly amidst the natural beauty of the Appalachian landscape, surrounded by blooming wildflowers and towering trees. Educational programs flourished, integrating Blackwater's story into curricula to teach future generations about the consequences of silence and the power of collective activism. The arts embraced the narrative as well, with poets, musicians, painters, and writers weaving themes of sacrifice, resilience, and justice into their work, ensuring that the miner's legacy lived on vibrantly in cultural memory. Danny's role expanded far beyond Matewan. He became a mentor to passionate activists, a trusted advisor to investigative journalists, and a respected voice in legal circles committed to exposing corruption and defending workers' rights. His leadership helped forge a coalition of advocates determined to confront new waves of secrecy and negligence wherever they arose. While progress had been made, Danny understood that the fight against entrenched interest was ongoing, as those who profit from opacity continually seek new ways to evade accountability. His work underscored the necessity of vigilance, education, and unbreakable solidarity. In reflective moments, Danny often found himself standing at the entrance of the memorial site, enveloped by the hush of the Appalachian morning or the quiet majesty of a starlit sky. Surrounded by nature's tranquil beauty, he felt the palpable presence of the miners, their spirit interwoven with the earth and the community that bore their legacy. Their voices, once stifled beneath layers of dust and deceit, had risen powerfully to illuminate the need for truth and justice. This emergence transformed Blackwater Mine's legacy from a story of sorrow to a beacon of hope, an enduring testament to the strength of human dignity and the courage of those who refuse to be silenced. Danny's whispered vows to carry their memory forward carried on the mountain winds, serving as solemn promises that the miners' sacrifices would never be forgotten and that their legacy would continue to inspire generations to come. This legacy stands not only as a tribute to those who perished, but as a rallying cry for all who seek transparency, equity, and justice in every corner of society. It is a living, breathing testament to the truth that no matter how deeply buried, injustice can never withstand the persistent light of courage and collective will. In the heart of Appalachia and beyond, the story of Blackwater Mine remains a powerful reminder that from the darkest tunnels of history, hope will ultimately emerge, illuminating the path toward a more just and compassionate world. In the long, winding years following the tragic events at Blackwater Mine, the story of those 17 miners silenced beneath the Appalachian earth transcended mere local tragedy to become a profound and enduring symbol of resilience, justice, and transformative change echoing across generations and borders. Once concealed under layers of coal dust, silence, and deception, their fate was courageously unearthed by a community unwilling to let their sacrifices be forgotten. A community championed by Danny Morrison. Danny's journey from a bereaved grandson seeking answers to a formidable advocate for workers' rights and transparency illuminated the dark corners of industrial negligence and systemic corruption, igniting a nationwide movement that altered the fabric of governance and corporate accountability. Danny's relentless pursuit of truth propelled him from the shadows of Matewan's somber streets to the halls of power, where his compelling testimony and steadfast advocacy inspired sweeping reforms in mining safety and corporate ethics. Groundbreaking legislation followed, enshrining rigorous safety protocols, enhanced corporate transparency, and, critically, expanded whistleblower protections that shielded those brave enough to challenge institutional wrongdoing. This wave of reform swept far beyond the coal mines, influencing industries nationwide where workers' lives had too often been gambled away for profit and concealment. The ethos of accountability and human dignity, forged in the fires of Blackwater's tragedy, began to reshape policies and practices at multiple levels of government and corporate management. Parallel to this societal evolution was the transformation of the Blackwater Mine itself. Where once stood a sealed crypt of sorrow, lay a memorial park and educational center, a hallowed ground where names were carved into granite and stories whispered through the changing seasons. Families of the lost miners found a sacred place for remembrance and healing, while visitors and scholars alike came to bear witness and absorb invaluable lessons on the human cost of negligence and silence. Educational curricula incorporated Blackwater's story, teaching young minds about the dangers of complacency and the power of solidarity to confront injustice. The arts blossomed around this shared history. Painters, musicians, writers, and performers wove the miners' courage and community's resilience into tapestries of cultural memory, ensuring their legacy thrived in hearts and minds. Danny's dedication extended beyond Matewan's borders into a broader ecosystem of activists, journalists, legal experts, and community organizers united by a shared cause. He mentored new generations of advocates, equipping them with wisdom, courage, and the tools necessary to confront ongoing abuses and systemic corruption. While the victories were significant, Danny remained ever vigilant, recognizing that entrenched powers often adapt, developing new strategies to obscure truth and delay accountability. His work reaffirmed that the struggle for justice is neither finite nor effortless, but requires persistent collective commitment. In moments of quiet reflection, Danny often returned to the peaceful environs of the memorial site, embraced by the Appalachian wilderness, the gentle hum of nature mingling with the indelible echoes of the miner's sacrifice. Under the vast canopy of stars or the crisp mountain air, he felt the enduring presence of those 17 men, whose lives now fundamentally shaped the community's identity and mission. Their voices, once silenced beneath rubble and deceit, had risen into a clarion call for transparency, justice, and human dignity, an enduring light piercing through even the darkest of tunnels. The Blackwater Mine tragedy, forever etched into the soil and soul of Appalachia, had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of community, courage, and relentless pursuit of truth. Danny's whispered vows carried on the mountain breeze transformed into solemn promises that the miners' memories would be preserved with honor, their sacrifices would fuel the ongoing fight for justice, and the flame of truth would burn undiminished through all generations. This living legacy serves as a profound reminder that, regardless of how deeply injustice may be buried, the unyielding spirit of those who seek justice will always illuminate the way forward. As such, the story of Blackwater Mine remains a timeless call to vigilance, courage, and unwavering resolve, a beacon guiding all who dare to confront oppression and champion the rights and dignity of every worker and community across the world. In the wake of the Blackwater Mine disaster, the passage of time only deepened the reverberations of its profound impact on the community of Matewan and the broader society it touched. The 17 miners who lost their lives beneath the earth became immortalized not just as victims of a tragic accident, but as symbols of courage, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of justice. What was once concealed beneath layers of dust and silence shattered into the light through the unwavering resolve of Danny Morrison and a community unwilling to accept the erasure of their history. Danny's personal journey, born of grief and propelled by determination, evolved into a catalyst for sweeping reforms and widespread recognition of the critical importance of transparency, accountability, and workers' rights. Laws and regulations were transformed to prioritize human life and safety, demanding stricter oversight, transparent corporate practices, and protections for those who dared to expose wrongdoing. These systemic changes rippled through industries far beyond mining, setting new standards for ethical governance and reinforcing the principle that profit could never justify negligence or secrecy. The Blackwater Mine site itself became a sacred memorial park and educational hub, a place where families, scholars, and visitors gathered to honor the fallen and learn from history. Educational programs rooted in the miners' stories fostered awareness and activism, ensuring new generations grasp the vital lessons of courage and communal responsibility. Cultural expressions flourished, capturing the spirit of resilience and remembrance in art, music, and literature. Danny Morrison's influence grew as he mentored allies and activists, guiding efforts to hold power to account and safeguard vulnerable communities. His vigilance remained steadfast, recognizing that the struggle against corruption and injustice is ongoing and requires renewal from each generation committed to truth. In quiet reflection beneath the Appalachian sky, surrounded by nature's peaceful beauty at the memorial site, Danny felt the enduring presence of those 17 brave souls. Their legacy, once buried in silence, now illuminated a powerful path forward, a beacon of hope, justice, and unity that continues to inspire the unyielding human spirit to strive for a better, fairer future. The story of Blackwater Mine stands not only as a chapter of sorrow, but as a living testament to the power of truth to transform lives and communities, ensuring that such sacrifices will never be forgotten and that justice will always prevail. In the many years that stretch beyond the haunting tragedy of Blackwater Mine, the echoes of that devastating event continued to resonate deeply within the tightly knit community of Matewan and far beyond its Appalachian hills, forging a legacy that intertwines sorrow with the powerful threads of resilience, justice, and transformative progress. The 17 miners whose lives were abruptly and unjustly taken beneath layers of coal and secrecy moved beyond being mere names lost to history. Instead, they became enduring symbols of human courage, the sacred cost of truth, and a rallying point for all those dedicated to confronting industrial negligence and systemic corruption wherever it lurks. At the core of this monumental transformation stood Danny Morrison, whose personal grief over the loss of his grandfather ignited an unyielding flame of determination to honor those lost and to hold accountable those who sought to bury the truth. Danny's evolution, from a local sheriff burdened with haunting mysteries to a national figurehead and fervent advocate, exemplified the profound impact one individual's relentless pursuit of justice can have on a community, a state, and ultimately, a nation. His tireless efforts mobilized lawmakers, citizens, and activists, galvanizing legislative reforms that not only redefined mining safety protocols, but also mandated unprecedented transparency and ethical responsibility from corporations and government institutions alike. The reforms that followed reshaped the industrial landscape. Rigorous safety standards became enforceable law, inspections were intensified, and corporate malfeasance was met with harsh penalties. Whistleblowers, previously vulnerable to retaliation and silence, were now protected under robust legal frameworks, emboldening workers to expose dangers without fear. These changes rippled far beyond the coal fields of Appalachia, influencing industries nationwide and fostering a culture where human life would no longer be subordinated beneath the voracious appetite for profit and secrecy. This transformation nurtured a new societal understanding that justice is not merely reactive but proactive, and that accountability must be woven deeply into the fabric of governance and corporate conduct. Simultaneously, the physical site of Blackwater Mine underwent its own metamorphosis, shifting from a sealed crypt of grief and concealment into a vibrant, sacred memorial and educational center. This place, once cloaked in silence, blossomed into a living testament to remembrance and resilience, where families, descendants, visitors, and scholars gathered to honor the miners' memories and to learn from the grave consequences of silence and neglect. Granite monuments engraved with each miner's name stood amidst wildflowers and ancient trees, anchored by exhibits and programs designed to impart critical lessons about courage, solidarity, and the necessity of vigilance. The narrative permeated educational curricula, inspiring generations with stories of sacrifice and the imperative to uphold justice and dignity. Art and culture further embraced Blackwater's legacy, channeling its themes into powerful creative expressions across mediums. Poetry that mourned yet celebrated, paintings that captured the grit and heart of the community, songs that echoed the miners' struggles and hopes. Through these cultural endeavors, the miners' spirits were immortalized and their stories transmitted beyond the pages of history books, living language that stirred hearts and minds to collective action. Danny's influence expanded into a broad network of committed advocates, legal warriors, investigative journalists, and grassroots organizers, all driven by a unified mission to unearth truth and protect the vulnerable. His mentorship nurtured rising leaders equipped with the courage, insight, and tools necessary to navigate the ongoing challenges posed by entrenched interests determined to shield their misdeeds. Despite significant gains, Danny remained acutely vigilant, understanding that the quest for justice is ceaseless, fraught with complex battles that demand agility, resolve, and unshakable conviction. In moments of solemn reflection, Danny would often stand at the entrance to the memorial site, beneath a sky heavy with stars and the whisper of mountain breezes, enveloped by the serene beauty of the Appalachian wilderness. In those quiet hours, he sensed the profound and indelible presence of those 17 miners, their courage and sacrifice forever etched into the land, and the collective consciousness of a community reborn through remembrance. Their silenced voices, once muffled beneath rubble and deceit, had surged forward as an illuminating beacon, a resounding call to transparency, dignity, and unending pursuit of justice, regardless of the darkness that seeks to conceal it. Thus, the legacy of Blackwater Mine transcended tragedy. It became a resilient flame of hope and a testament to the enduring power of human courage, community strength, and moral clarity. Danny's whispered vows to carry their story forward rode the mountain winds like a sacred promise, that the sacrifices of the fallen would never fade into obscurity, and that their voices would fuel generations of advocates committed to ensuring that truth, no matter how deeply buried, would forever rise. This legacy stands as an eternal reminder that even in the darkest tunnels of history, the human spirit can forge a path toward light, justice, and a more compassionate world. The story of Blackwater Mine endures not only as a chilling account of loss, but as a clarion call to vigilance, courage, and an unbreakable commitment to the protection of every worker's dignity and rights everywhere, inspiring all who hear it to carry the torch of justice onward forever. In the vast tapestry of history, few stories carry as much weight and profound meaning as that of Blackwater Mine, a tale that, after decades of silence and sorrow, blossomed into an enduring legacy of truth, resilience, justice, and community transformation that continues to inspire generations beyond the remote Appalachian hills of Matewan. The 17 miners who were lost beneath that unforgiving earth did not perish in vain. Their lives and sacrifices ignited a powerful movement that shattered the walls of secrecy imposed by corporate greed and governmental complacency, revealing the stark consequences of unchecked negligence and sparking a relentless pursuit of accountability and human dignity. At the heart of this extraordinary journey stood Danny Morrison, a man propelled by personal loss yet driven by a profound sense of justice that transcended individual grief. From the beginnings of a solemn and urgent search for answers regarding his grandfather's fate, Danny emerged as a beacon of courage and unwavering determination, forcing the world to confront uncomfortable truths that many sought to bury forever. His steadfast advocacy rippled through state legislatures and national halls of power, ushering in life-saving reforms that revolutionized mining regulations, enhanced corporate transparency, and fortified protections for whistleblowers who dare to speak out in the face of intimidation. These sweeping legal transformations did more than change laws. They altered the very fabric of industrial ethics, mandating that the sanctity of human life must always outweigh the pursuit of profit. The physical site of Blackwater Mine itself underwent a symbolic rebirth, morphing from a sealed crypt of tragedy into a living memorial and educational sanctuary, where the earth that once concealed so much pain now nurtured remembrance and hope. Here, families, historians, students, and visitors gathered amidst towering trees and blossoming wildflowers to honor the miners' memories and to absorb the critical lessons born from their sacrifice. Educational programs wove the narrative into classrooms, ensuring that the courage and injustice of the past inform the vigilance and conscience of future generations. Meanwhile, artists transformed sorrow into celebration through evocative paintings, moving compositions, poignant poems, and stirring performances that kept the story alive in hearts and souls far and wide. But Danny's legacy reached far beyond local memorials or legislative achievements. He became a mentor and leader among a vast network of activists, journalists, legal experts, and ordinary citizens united by a common mission to expose wrongdoing, protect vulnerable workers, and uphold justice wherever it is threatened. Throughout his life, Danny remained vigilant against those who sought to twist, distort, or obscure truth, knowing full well that the battle for transparency and ethical governance is ongoing, complex, and demanding. His unwavering resolve became a guiding light for those who continue to bear the torch of accountability in industry and government alike. In the quiet moments beneath the boundless Appalachian sky, among the rustling leaves, the gentle mountain breeze, and the blooming wildflowers that now grace the mine's entrance, Danny felt the enduring presence of the 17 miners. Their legacy was no longer etched solely in stone or memory, but lived vibrantly in the community's strength, the nation's conscience, and the global quest for justice. Their voices, once muffled beneath coal and cover-ups, now echoed as a clarion call. That truth, no matter how deeply buried or fervently suppressed, possesses an unyielding power to rise, illuminate, and transform. The story of Blackwater Mine is not solely a narrative of tragedy, but a living testament, a beacon that celebrates the indomitable courage of individuals who stand against oppression, the sacred value of human life and dignity, and the unbreakable bonds forged within communities that refuse to forget. Danny Morrison's solemn vow to carry their story forward reverberates on the mountain winds as a timeless promise that the sacrifices made will forever inspire vigilance, courage, and justice for all who toil in the shadows, across all lands and generations. In this, the legacy of Blackwater Mine transcends history. It becomes a perpetual call to action, urging humanity to confront darkness with light, silence with voice, and injustice with unwavering determination. It reminds us all that where there is courage and truth, even the deepest tunnels of despair can be illuminated by hope. transforming sorrow into strength and loss into lasting change. This is the enduring spirit of Blackwater Mine, a legacy that lives forever in the hearts of those who dare to seek justice and the promise of a brighter, more compassionate future for all.